Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the African American Mayors Association's 2021 Virtual Annual Conference. This year, the 2021 Annual Conference is being held on April 27th and May 11th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. All sessions are live streamed via Facebook and YouTube and will be available on those platforms for future viewing as well. I want to acknowledge the presence of our African American Mayors Business Council members, and also I want to acknowledge the conference sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is AT&T Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. Our diamond sponsor is AARP, Casey Family Programs, Cities United, Wells Fargo, and Comcast. Also, our quick fire chat sponsor is CTIA, International Well Building Institute, Starbucks, Verizon, Waste Management, and Waste Management. Our gold sponsor is United Airlines, and our silver is ShotSpotter. The theme of this year's annual conference is Forward Together, Mayors' Vision for Resilient Communities. For this conference, mayors from across the country will gather virtually to discuss building and deepening relationships and developing creative solutions to strengthen communities in times of change and uncertainty. The African American Mayors Association is the only organization exclusively representing Black mayors nationwide. AAMA ensures Black mayors are in the forefront of important issues such as justice reform, technology building, building smart cities, trade, and reducing the ranks of the uninsured. Our membership includes 150 mayors from large cities to small towns. We also benefit from the support of best practices of our Dynamic Business Council, led by our outgoing business chair, Paula Housington, and our vice chair, Calvin Booker. We have a dynamic agenda set for you today as we discuss building inclusive prosperity through entrepreneurship, broadband infrastructure, and reimagining public safety. So without further ado, we will now transition to session one, moderated by AAMA Advisory Board member and former Mayor of Gary, Indiana, and CEO of the Chicago Urban League, Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson, Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson, to kick off our discussion. Mayor, take it away. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us and for allowing me to play a role with the AAMA's annual conference. We all look forward to April, and generally we look forward to being together. But today we don't have that opportunity, but we still have the opportunity to bring you important programming as you think about what you can do and how you can lead your cities. We are joined today by two dynamic mayors who will talk about building inclusive and resilient cities. And as I think about that, it's really important to understand that you may have a thriving city, but if it isn't thriving for everyone, then we have missed the mark. I'm pleased to first introduce Mayor Deanna Ingram, someone who has led East Point, Georgia with resolve, with vision, and with a desire to create an inclusive city. She understands the importance of entrepreneurship as the daughter of someone who had a construction business. And I have to say it, she's my soror. So welcome, Mayor. I am also pleased to introduce another Georgia mayor, Mayor Hardy Davis from Augusta, Georgia. Mayor Davis is a past president of AAMA. He is also a former state senator, a former state rep, and the mayor who brought the Innovation and Cybersecurity Center to the city of Augusta, and has included so many other innovative projects. And so today we are excited to talk about what an inclusive city looks like. Mayors, we know that there has also always been this notion of the American dream. The fact that people have the opportunity to achieve whatever they dream, and the opportunity to pursue that dream without barriers. But we all know that that is not true for everyone. And very often, it is the mayor's role to remove the barriers, to create the opportunity, to really make sure that that dream is not elusive. And in cities like Gary and East Point and Augusta and other places throughout the country where our poverty rates sometimes are higher than other cities, it's particularly important to be intentional about how we remove those barriers. And so I want to ask you first, mayors, how have you removed those barriers in the cities of East Point, Georgia, and in Augusta? I'm going to ask Mayor Ingram to go first.
Thank you again, Sora Mayor, for that introduction. And it's a continuous thing. Reality of it is that people kind of go out of experiencing poverty at different times. And we have to create an infrastructure in the city to be able to support and meet people where they are. And I think COVID really helped us accelerate the infrastructure that we have in the city of East Point. The pandemic hit in March of 2020, and by the first week of April, we had pivoted our Parks and Recreation Department to start being a food distribution center, and have distributed over 4 million pounds of food to people in our community. Because what was very clear is that we had to get back to basics. People need food and shelter. And so we have continued to do that weekly to be able to meet the needs of people not only experiencing poverty, but what we saw during the pandemic is that it hit so differently that a lot of different people and different income levels were impacted. And so we wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity to meet a need for our residents in our community with dignity and no judgment. Like, we're just here to help get through this together. I kept assuring them we will get through this together. The other thing that became very clear is financial assistance. We had our community, our unemployment rate in February of 2020 was around 4.7%. And by the end of April 2020, it was 20%. It stayed in double digits until the end of the year. It was like we topped out in December around 10%. So it went down, but still double digits. And people needed employment, and we needed to figure out how to bridge those gaps. And so we had offered an entrepreneurship, TV and apprenticeship workforce development program the previous year to residents in the city. And we're planning to offer another one, and it kind of got delayed. So we did that. And we were able to train 10 people and have 100% placement rate on TV or film productions. So we're going into season 3 with that. We had started conversations with Construction Ready to be able to provide some construction workforce development services and support. That kind of stalled, but we just kicked that off, and we're doing 2 cohorts for that, right? Because to help people climb out of poverty and help them, assist them, really got to get to building skills, building people, and building the community to help ensure that the infrastructure is there to support them. We've also have been in talks with the security company, but more importantly, we actually completed 2 cohorts of the Kaufman Fast Track entrepreneurship course. And, you mentioned my dad was an entrepreneur. I've kind of been a serial entrepreneur off and on. But the reality of it is that people are finding themselves exploring entrepreneurship are actually following their dreams because of the fact that they need to be able to take care of their families. So the timing was like perfect. Our first cohort happened kind of earlier in 2020. And we had about 10 people sign up and participation was low. For the one that we launched in January of this year, kind of like start the new year off right with your business plan, we had 15 people participate. So we graduated 20 people and helped them gain the knowledge to be entrepreneurs, to be able to help continue to support their families. And so I feel like the holistic approach to really addressing what people need, not just looking at poverty and the symptoms of it, but how do we get to root causes and build those skills and capacity and put infrastructure in place to meet the basic needs of residents.
That is really interesting, because what you've proven and what we've seen over and over again is that, you know, as difficult and as challenging as the pandemic was, it also created opportunity. Did you find that in Augusta, Mayor Davis? Mayor Davis, I think you're muted.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm incredibly pleased to be joining both my good friend, Mayor Ingram, and our friend, Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson. This is an important conversation when we talk about inclusive communities. We've got similar challenges as my colleague mayor in East Point, Georgia. Here in Augusta, while we may be Georgia's second largest city, poverty, lack of access to food, where there's insecurity around food, the challenges of healthcare during this global pandemic, they're not unique to cities all across America, and we certainly have faced our own challenges. What we've done are very similar things with broad partnerships with food distribution, not only with the mayor's office leading several charges to do that, but our Golden Harvest Food Bank has been a staunch advocate and champion. Right at the height of the pandemic, we partnered with World Central Kitchen and Chef Jose Andreas. We were delivering 25,000 meals a week to citizens across our community in an effort to make sure that people had healthy food options and choices, and that they had them for the course of a week, to include our senior citizens. That's important for us, while at the same time understanding, even as Mayor Ingram indicated, at the height of the pandemic, we were tracking at about 3.5% unemployment. And then when things really broke loose, and the challenges associated with that, not only did you see people who were either underemployed or unemployed totally, but we saw businesses, small businesses, which are the bedrock of our nation's economy and certainly the economy in Georgia and Augusta. And so we established right out of the gate the small business relief plan. We set aside $1 million for that, and then we began to grow and expand that. We look for opportunities from a small business perspective to provide relief with the annual fees that they would have to pay in terms of starting their businesses and continuing that. Those things have all been significant in terms of trying to stabilize the community, because we can't talk about inclusive communities unless we're also understanding the challenges that businesses have, and they're employing our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, and even our family members. And so we did some initial things early on to try to bring some sense of stability to the broader community around food, around access to healthcare, around business relief opportunities, while at the same time experiencing the challenges of the state not getting unemployment benefits to individuals when they needed to. And so we went from that to providing rental assistance, making sure that when we put in place eviction moratoriums, that we took a step further and used HCD, or what we consistently call community development block grant dollars, providing rental assistance, making sure people could stay in their homes, and we didn't have a new population of homeless individuals. And so those were very important initial first steps around providing the tools for people to not only have a sense of dignity, knowing that we would work together, we would fight this pandemic together, but we would get through it together as well. And on the other side of that, particularly around this area of building inclusive opportunities. Several years ago, I took our local entrepreneur incubator to a Kaufman event with us. We were successful in securing a $499,000 grant that we were able to help build a bench of entrepreneurs who have launched businesses here in the community, some that are tech startups, and others that are more traditional businesses. But we've gone beyond that now. And the most important efforts around these things are what we call make startups. You can't talk about entrepreneurship in America, in Georgia, or in any city or state for that matter, without understanding workforce development. And we have to see entrepreneurship as a workforce development issue. And so we've been leaning into that to talk about it from the perspective that this is really a high demand career opportunity or pathway, and going all the way from K through 12, providing some opportunities for folks to be able to do that. Mayor Freeman Wilson, you're muted.
Both of you talked about the importance of supporting entrepreneurs and how the Kauffman Foundation supported your efforts in that regard. I think about our experience in the city of Chicago, and how when PPP started, and there weren't a lot of small businesses, especially small Black businesses, that were gaining access to those funds. Mayor Lightfoot asked us to step in, the Chicago Urban League and some other organizations, to provide those micro grants to small businesses. And Mayor Davis, you talked about that as well. Can you talk about the importance of that type of assistance that you all have given in your cities to small businesses, and how they have supported those businesses, how you have supported those businesses?
Without question, I think it's important to recognize, once again, that small businesses really are the heartbeat of our economy, and it doesn't matter where you are. And it was important for us to take those dollars through the First CARES Act and leverage those in a tangible way, because there were businesses, particularly minority-owned businesses, that were not successful in getting the P3 loans. And we did it in a way that they were grants. What I wanted to make sure is that we were not requiring people to pay these dollars back on the heels of the greatest pandemic in our generation that we've ever faced. And so we did that once again, while at the same time providing substantial relief to the tune, I think, of about $1.2 million in terms of permits, licenses, and fees from an annual standpoint that small businesses have to levy. And so I think it made a huge difference. The challenge going forward is, how do we create that framework for additional dollars and assistance to help through the long term? We know that the hospitality and tourism sector has been the hardest hit across communities. And so even in Augusta, they have seen substantial shifting and change. My Convention and Visitors Bureau, I believe that they're off almost about $1.5 million in terms of revenue that they normally would have gotten, because we didn't have the festivals. We did have the Iron Man event where you've got 4,700 people coming into our city with an economic impact of $8-9 million. Those things, they make a big difference in terms of how we once again stabilize. So it was important for us to do it. We continue to look for ways. We received a Treasury grant of about $6.5 million that has allowed us to partner with United Way and provide additional renters assistance with now the $1.9 trillion Biden plan that we see from Congress coming into play. We in Augusta stand to receive about $84 million. And we're having some broad conversations about not only what we do in terms of bending that arc towards justice and equity in our community around housing, around homelessness, and workforce development, but more importantly, how do we help small businesses in the community who desperately need it, while making a tangible difference to the least of these. And so we're going to continue to make inroads, but the focus again is around building inclusive communities that will have an opportunity to prosper beyond the pandemic.
Mayor Ingram, would you talk about the assistance to small businesses and the importance of it?
So critically important. So when I think of small business, I think of my hairstylist in the city of East Point, right? Who was like, I haven't gotten anything yet. I tried to apply, and so East Point is a little different than Augusta in that our CARES Act funding went through the county.
Sure.
So the county received the CARES Act funding, and unfortunately, that was a very contentious and eye-opening experience of us actually trying to get money into our communities to be able to support our residents and small businesses. And so once we finally received some money, which was around October, and of course it had to be spent by December, we weren't able as a local community, a local city, to set up our own business support programs, but the county a number of programs and a number of resources. They allocated millions of dollars to small businesses. But of course, we kept saying, my businesses in my community are saying they haven't received the support. So we were able to, with the funds that we did receive, set up a utilities assistance program for our residents, and also apply for additional grants to be able to provide rental assistance. But the small business part was kind of handled at the county level. But I can tell you that we have tried to continue to work with the county. There was recently a workshop for small businesses on how to access the funds that are coming, kind of walking them through before it gets there. And so making sure that we're sharing that information of those resources and those workshops that are out to kind of help walk them through the process. And then also, I've reached out to banks who specifically are interested in increasing their small business accounts. So not just businesses in general or, the personal accounts, they specifically have an interest in increasing their small business accounts. And how do we, from a Kaufman perspective, right, is knowledge, capital, and network.
That's it.
The fast track is the knowledge. The network, we have monthly opportunities for that. We have an annual symposium, but the capital is key. And how do we make sure that we're building that ecosystem in our community? So that's what we're doing as we kind of continue to go through this. And, CDFI, big banks are very open to working with communities like ours. And so we're exploring those avenues.
You raised, go ahead, Mayor Davis.
Yeah, let me mention something. Mayor Ingram mentioned the fact that they did not get direct funding. None of us received direct funding unless we were a city or a county of 500,000 plus people in that first wave of CARES Act funding. And I think that's the power of mayors with this most recent round of funding, us lending our voices to this broader conversation so that there's not only direct funding to cities and counties, regardless of population, but we also don't have to wait on the state to try to decide if they want to distribute those dollars. I look back at how much more we could have done to help communities of interest around businesses and even individuals. But here in Georgia, because the money came to the state, we only received 10 million of the 25 million we were supposed to receive because the governor decided to hold on those dollars. And that's important in this broader discussion because now with this new tranche of money that's coming in, we're going to get it directly. We're going to, because we, again, as mayors, as leaders, know best what's going on in our cities, and we're going to be able to make tremendous impact around these significant social issues, these health issues, these issues of economic opportunity and equity, because we're getting direct funding.
And you raised that, and that is one of the points relative to the importance of organizations like the AAMA. But also when Mayor Ingram talked about the importance of information and networking, that is really how the Kaufman Foundation can help cities to help their businesses. I mean, everybody wants to check. Let's be clear about it. You can always do what you want to do with that. But what I've learned, and certainly what I learned during my days as a mayor and what I continue to learn with the Chicago Urban League is that the information that you can provide to businesses for the business owners can be priceless. And that's the value we think of Kaufman's new business plan, the America's New Business Plan, as well as the Startups Up Coalition. And so we would just encourage those mayors who are listening, who may or may not be a part of the Kaufman Initiative, to check out the Startups Up Coalition, because it has the ability to really provide that information and that network to your cities. But let's talk about that technical assistance. How do you get that out to your businesses? How do you make that available? And how do you do it particularly in the midst of a pandemic?
You know, that's a great question, particularly in terms of how do you do it in the pandemic. I think one of the things that we've all learned is that there are different ways to conduct business in today's economy. And instead of necessarily looking at it from the perspective of, Zoom meetings are a bad thing, the reality of it is I can have a meeting with you right now in real time across the globe without having to get on a plane or anything. And so we've got to leverage these technologies that allow us to be not only portable, but present at the same time. And so many small businesses didn't have those capabilities, but being able to provide them with just insight on low to no cost solutions. You know, most everybody's got a smartphone, they've got some type of tablet or device that you can conduct business in ways across the globe, not just the state or your city, but the nation. And so we've led some initiatives around that, sharing some very basic things. We've got our Greater Augusta Black Chamber of Commerce that's gotten involved in having a series of webinars pushing this type of information out as well. At the same time, our group, the Clubhouse here in Augusta, that was the recipient of the Kaufman grant, they've done a substantial job in terms of working with Kaufman and leveraging their assets here at the Georgia Cyber Innovation and Training Center, of where they're housed at right now, to help leverage getting people into that stream of information and knowledge and networking, and being able to do that in circles that they normally would not have been a part of. And I applaud my local folks, Eric Parker and Grace Belangia, because they've been focused around this conversation that in order to accelerate economic recovery and address the underlying public health challenges that we're experiencing even now, but more importantly, workforce and entrepreneurship issues of inequity, that is the only way we're going to be able to address generational poverty and its role, not just from a health standpoint, but just from an access standpoint. Even when it comes to, we talked about the Paycheck Protection Program and people of color not being able to access that. Often it's because I didn't know, I didn't have the relationships, I didn't have the access. And so they've done a great job of helping to build that network, that framework around workforce innovation, entrepreneurship, and the strategies of how even the most basic business could have those access points.
Yeah, I would also add, so again, the other, I guess, bright side or the efficiencies learned during COVID was people were looking more at technology sources, so emails and, communicating in a technology way, or sending those things. And so we were able to increase the people that we were reaching. So we were always sending business newsletters, sending information out. But when everybody was forced to kind of this technology world, right, I believe we were able to connect with and more people through those emails, through those monthly connection opportunities. We also have in our city two businesses that specifically focus around building entrepreneurs and Black wealth. So the Legacy Center is modeled after Black Wall Street, right, and trying to bring that back into our communities. And so providing a number of opportunities for people to connect and network, but also building capacity around entrepreneurship skills. The Vault at East Point is another business focused on wealth, real estate, health, and in the arts. And so this entrepreneur piece and really supporting Black businesses and bringing people who, you know, are connected to their brands and to their initiatives into the city or into knowing about the resources available in East Point, but also having resources on our website. I feel like the fact that they're there, more people have been able to actually access it. So when you click on the links, it talks about the Small Business Administration, right? It talks about the Georgia Department of Revenue. How do you really connect people to the existing resources that are in place? And we also have a small business incentive program in the city of East Point to provide incentives for like facade improvement, initial business license, a tax credit for we own our own utilities, right? So water, electric, utility rate reduction. So things to help people get from garage to storefront. So being able to have that information in place or have those initiatives in place for such a time as this, and I feel like people have access them more because people have really had to, you know, be the mayors, governors, and presidents of their own household, right? And really figure out how to lead their families through this difficult time. And we just wanted to be a partner with it and make it easier, right? We will get through this together is what I continue to say. And that is by meeting the needs and really working collaboratively together.
You know, one of the things that our preliminary research at Kauffman has shown is that there was an increase in businesses in terms of startups during the pandemic. Did you find that to be the case? And, you know, did you find it to be more traditional or in other sectors that had not necessarily been in your communities before? What was your experience, Mayor Davis?
Well, in Augusta, we've seen certainly more traditional startups, but we also have seen business expansion where you've got businesses that made a decision that even in the midst of the pandemic, they were going to expand into other parts of the community. We're very fortunate to see that happening while at the same time to have new businesses, new startups, new entrepreneurs in the economy making a difference, whether it was food service, whether it was cleaning services, you know, some of your more essential things that you have to have. You had new people entering into that space saying, we're going to provide a service. Even now, just within the last week, you know, we've had news reports and features of businesses that are in the hospitality industry that have said, we're going to make a go at it. And I'm really excited about that because people believe in this community. They believe in the people in the community, and they're willing to take those risks while at the same time knowing that they've got a government that's doing everything we can to support and bolster those efforts. And I think that's one of the things the pandemic has shown as well, that people's perception, people's experience with the access points in local government have fundamentally changed. When you talk about, you know, eviction moratoriums being extended for significant periods of time, when you talk about water moratoriums and you're not letting people water get cut off because you care about people, and then you're, you know, trying to meet the need around food security by providing meals. Those things, they matter. They get a chance to see people in government and their elected leaders differently, as opposed to, quote, someone who's on this high perch, you know, looking for an opportunity to do things that may not always be in their best interest. So I think that's what's important as we move forward, while at the same time knowing that we're not done yet. We've got more work to do to create that inclusive community, to include people who have been left behind when it comes to being able to start up a business. And then those that are looking for career opportunities, changes. You know, how do we do that? Here in Augusta, we've created a pathway for students in grades 3 through 12. They can become the cyber patriots of the nation right here, starting in grades 3 through 12, because of the infrastructure we have in place, where historically individuals, Black and brown, don't always go into those careers, but they're high paying, long-term opportunities whether it's the military or private sector. And so I think it's having the nexus between good public policy, good community relations, and finding out how to bridge those gaps to include layering on workforce development and education in a way that allows individuals to include our youth to see themselves in a way that they may not have seen themselves before. I oftentimes say this: a man or a woman cannot be what he or she cannot see. So we've got to create something for young people to be able to see that inspires them, that encourages them. I'm not 6'4". I'm not dunking anymore. And there's not a single thing wrong with that. And I applaud all of my athletes. I can play with the best of them, but I also understand my grace gift. Instead of playing me a dribble to shoot, you can pay me to talk, or you can pay me to code. Those are things that allow us to inspire, to engage, but create that inclusive community, that inclusive economy of where generationally you're able to transform your family's trajectory.
That is an excellent point, Mayor Davis. What about in East Point, Mayor? What have you seen in terms of business startups?
So definitely have seen an increase in, as I mentioned, through the Kaufman Fast Track program. That was 20 new entrepreneurs, right, that were trained with the knowledge to be able to be successful in their business, and hopefully, shorten that 3 to 5 year loss, or at least be planning for it as it takes to commit to the business. But the knowledge part is really, really critical. And so, I think Mayor Davis mentioned the public policy piece. So the East Point City Council adopted a resolution several years ago from a city perspective saying we are committed to building a full continuum of support for small business and entrepreneurs in our city. And I think that is critically important when the government says this is important to us and that this is the work that we're going to commit to doing. And I'm a person that believes in quality, not quantity. So when I attended the Kaufman Foundation conference and learned about Fast Track, and I was like, okay, so this is my go-to for entrepreneurialism, for the ecosystem building, right? Like knowledge. I don't believe we need 10 different programs because we all can't speak the same language, right?
Sure.
So, having that, and we did it virtually. But what happened at we had a graduation ceremony, it was done virtually. But at the end, we had a food truck, which was on, the business of one of the participants, come to the vault at East Point location, and people were able to come and get their meals and kind of, socialize with CDC, following the guidelines, right? But really putting that support in action, and really not just saying we want to support, but putting things in place and showing up and being present to be able to help, know that when we say we're committed, we really are. And again, I think now more than ever, especially for communities of color, we really have to figure out how to resource map, how to connect these dots, how to have the knowledge, the network, and capital for entrepreneurialism, because our communities were disproportionately impacted more than others, right? When you talk about people who are unemployed and people who, find themselves trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet, being an entrepreneur is actually a way to, look at the glass as half full and be like, well, I don't have a job to go to, but I can create one for myself, right? I can create this business that will not only help take care of me and my family, but small businesses, as Mayor Davis said, are the lifeline of our communities. Small businesses stay. Big chain retail, if they go, it's a big building that's vacant, right? But the small businesses, they stay. They're really a part of the community and provide jobs. And so, that's kind of how we've been looking at it, as a real critical piece of economic development and really the sustainability of our city, because we know when small businesses succeed, communities in our city succeed because we stay partnered and committed to work.
We are so grateful for both of your insights and for you sharing your success in East Point, in Augusta. I'll have to tell you that Mayor Patterson Howard mentioned the technical assistance and education that comes from the Kaufman Foundation in our chat. And I thank you, Mayor, for that. That's one of my former drug court colleagues. But I also want us to understand, and Mayor Ingram, you made an incredible point when you talked about the larger businesses. And, you know, I get it. I've done it as mayor, as someone who supports a mayor now. You want that big company. You want that, 1,000, 2,000 job opportunity. But we know that the majority of people in our communities are employed by small businesses. And so our opportunity to support those businesses, to support those startups, and to do it with incredible partners like the Kauffman Foundation is just priceless. I would encourage folks to go and take a look at the Kauffman website to see America's New Business Plan, which is a bipartisan platform for helping and supporting businesses in your community. And then I would also invite cities and organizations, because it's not just limited to cities, to join us at startusupnow.org to read the plan and then sign up for updates for the work. And just want to congratulate you both for the success in your cities and for leading with just distinction during one of the most challenging times in our country. That was one of my biggest joys from the sidelines, to see my friends on CNN, to see you all leading in your respective communities, and to do it with a sense of calm, not panic, because you all knew you needed to reassure your residents, and that's just what you did. And so thanks for joining us out in cyberspace. And thank you for the opportunity to build inclusive and prosperous communities, because we know that when every resident has an opportunity to win, our cities have an opportunity to win.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. My name is Deanna Carter, and I am the Senior Director of Culture and Engagement for Waste Management. And I am here with my colleague, Susan Robinson, the Senior Director of Sustainability and Advocacy. And we are thrilled to talk to you today about waste management and our work in the communities around our commitment and values, and also sustainability. And so with that, I will advance here. And kick it over to you, Susan. Tell us a little bit about sustainability, just to make sure we were all on the same page.
Great, Deanna, thank you so much. And thank you all. We're so pleased to be here today. So I'm going to start with the definition. So we used to think about sustainability pretty narrowly in terms of the environment. However, it's really evolved over the years. In 2021, sustainability includes not only the environment, but also our employee relations, our community relations, and generally how well the company manages itself. Environmental, social, and governance, ESG. Sustainability encompasses all of these, which actually makes a lot of sense if you really think about it. Well-run companies that take care of their employees and their communities and the environment are simply better partners. I really love this connectivity between people and the environment. It sets the stage for a holistic 360-degree view of sustainability. It's part of our company's culture, which is a good transition back to you, Deanna.
No, absolutely. And it's interesting, right? When you think about sustainability and kind of making the impact in the community, where that starts is making the impact at home, and that's within the four walls of WM. And so it's really important that we all have a guidepost around what our commitments, what our values are as a company. And if you see on your screen here, we have 2 commitments and 4 values. Our 2 commitments being putting people first and always operating with success with integrity and committing to that. And then supporting those commitments are our 4 values: inclusion and diversity, our customers, safety, and the environment. And while we have a number of things that we can talk about in all of these facets, today we're going to spend most of our time talking about the inclusion and diversity efforts as well as the environment. And so, diving in, Susan, tell us about what are our sustainability goals and kind of how does that tie into the values that we just highlighted?
Great, thanks. So we've had a sustainability goal for 15 years. We updated them in 2018, and we continue to add to them to just make them more robust. Our basic long-term 2038 goal calls for avoiding 4 times the emissions that we create through our operations. This is mostly through our recycling programs and through using renewable fuel. And we have a people goal that includes making the communities in which we live and operate more resilient, safe, and sustainable. These goals help provide the guiding light for many of our environmental and social programs. We added new goals in 2025, including increasing our use of CNG trucks and using more renewable fuel. We're going to use 100% renewable electricity in our operations. We're going to get our contamination rates down to 10%, which is a pretty lofty goal in and of itself. We're developing better measurement systems for our emissions to be able to continue to reduce them. And we have a goal of paying 100% of our employees a living wage, of which we are very close to achieving already. We've also added some new social metrics and goals, and I'm going to let Tiana talk more about those.
Thank you. And sorry, I didn't mean to advance the slide so quickly. I was trying to find the button. But to your point around advancing additional goals and metrics, it's really important to us as we started to pull apart, what is our inclusion, equity, and diversity strategy, and how do we operationalize that? And there are 2 key factors that we wanted to put a stake in the ground. And the first one being lead the industry in female representation with a focus on improving awareness and access to frontline roles and promoting women in leadership positions. And so, it's no secret, right? Truck driving, it doesn't have a huge population of women, but as a leader in the industry, we see it our role is to try to encourage, educate, and create access for more women to get into the trucking industry, hopefully at Waste Management, but even more broadly where possible. And the other goal is really around improving our representation of diversity at each segment of our workforce, but in particular, that emphasis on leadership so that it's greater than or equal to the U.S. standards. So one exciting factoid, if you will, about 46% of our frontline workforce is diverse. But as we peeled apart the onion and really started to look at our IE&D strategy, we said, how do we make sure that diversity is matriculating up into leaderships? How do we create more access, more education, more opportunity for not only externally, but internally for our own employees, right? The natural inclination is just go out and hire more talent. While that's a part of the strategy, developing our talent is almost even more important in some cases. So how do we develop that talent? Obviously we've all experienced kind of the tragic impacts of the social injustice kind of movement over the last few years, and more particularly last year with the tragic death of George Floyd. Gave us an opportunity to serve as a catalyst to really mobilize even more quickly some of the strategies we were already planning to roll out. And so, but we know that change starts at the top, right? It starts from senior leaders putting that stake in the ground. And so we had our CEO, not we, but upon himself, decided to kind of put out a letter wanting to be a part of that solution. And then subsequently, our own senior leadership team had internal courageous conversations around what they could do and how they can impact with their own sphere of influence, making sure that not only Waste Management, but the world is a more equitable and inclusive place. From there, we got employees who were really excited and passionate about this work, but they were getting kind of analysis paralysis, right? There's so many things that they could do to try to make an impact. They didn't know where to start. So we launched this grassroots campaign called The Power of One. And you can see on the slide that we just had, where employees were kind of what's my one thing that I can do to improve inclusion, equity, and diversity at Waste Management or in the world. And so, we started with 1 or 2 pledges, and now we are inching in the thousands. And so we're really excited about that and continuing the momentum on that initiative. But that's part of it, right? How do we also celebrate? The goal around inclusion, equity, and diversity is not to be exclusionary to anyone, but to be inclusive of all. So how do we celebrate culture? How do we bring more voices to the table to learn about one another? And then going back to the conversation around talent, how do we create more access? And so 2 programs I'm going to just touch on pretty quickly that are on the slide here is we launched a program called Innovative Employment Pathways, where the goal is to help provide access and opportunity to homeless, overlooked and underserved youth, women, previously incarcerated. And so we're working pretty closely with community agencies. And as you all are likely aware, it's not just about the job, it's about how do you provide those wraparound services to support these employees as they embark on their new opportunities at an organization. And if you have access to this deck, you can click and watch some of the videos that we've talked about with regards to the IEP program. Another initiative that I am hopeful that I can partner with many of you on is our supply chain diversity effort. So we launched a program last year called Share the Mic and the Money Now. And really the impetus behind that was how do we get more corporations to the table to invest in Black-owned businesses, and how do we get more Black-owned businesses access so that they can pitch and share their products and services. We have since expanded that to be focused on women in general with diverse representation equally, so that we have equal representation of women in the U.S. And so we are very excited about that and are scaling from Houston now to nationally this year. And so there's just a lot of excitement and momentum around that because companies really haven't figured it out. There's a lot of money that's being spent on different vendors and suppliers, and how do we be more intentional about sharing the money or sharing the green in some instances? And so with that, I'll kick it back over to you, Susan, to talk a little bit about our how we're mitigating climate change.
Yeah, let's talk. That's great. Thank you so much, Tiana. So yes, when it comes to the environmental part of sustainability, we continue to implement programs to reduce our local and global impact. We've reduced our fleet emissions by 36%. We're creating and using renewable fuel and electricity. We're partnering with NASA and other organizations to use satellite imagery to continue to reduce the emissions from our facilities. And we're recycling. We're investing in recycling like never before. And this is really important. Recycling starts with creating that loop and replacing virgin materials with recycled feedstock. Our recyclables create a feedstock for the manufacturing industry, which creates jobs. Next slide. We also have a quick snapshot of really all that we've done in terms of investments. We're on our 4th year of investing $100 million each year. So $400 million just in the last 4 years alone. We've added 5 new recycling facilities across North America. We're upgrading our facilities. We're spending money on optical sorting and even on robotics at these facilities. We've got new facilities in Chicago, in Oakland, in Raleigh, North Carolina, in Salt Lake City, and in Los Angeles. By 2023, 93% of all of our recyclables will be moving through those facilities with the latest upgrades. So it's really exciting. It's a time when we're really, I think, seeing that long-term investment in sustainability around recycling.
It's so neat when you're talking about those robotics arms. I remember one of my first trips when I joined the organization was actually going out to one of those recycling facilities and seeing that robotic arm sort. It was so much faster, obviously, and a lot safer than having the humans do it, and it was really exciting to see how we're progressing and excited to see that investment. And I will share on a personal note that I have bought my first pair of recycled sneakers that's made of recycled material, and hopefully my feet don't sweat too much because it's made out of plastic bottles. So we will see. I'll let you know how my gym routine goes.
I love it. I love it. Well, one of the things we can do is we can help educate people so we are getting the right materials into our facilities so they can end up being made in into those sneakers that we talked about. We actually have, for about a decade now, we've been investing in recycling education programs, and we have a really nice website. It's Recycle Right, if you were just to do a search for it. I have included the link at the bottom here. And we have a really robust education program to help people know how to recycle the right things correctly. We provide all of our information, whether it's posters, stickers, graphics, to anybody. It's basically open source. And we also have a widget that cities can include on their websites as well. So you'll see that link there that anybody, you're free to go to, and it'll help you along to know how you can use this material in your communities. And then finally, we've been a leader when it comes to the importance of the demand for recyclable materials. Again, recycling is only happening when we create that full circularity, that loop. And so we need to have markets for those end products. And in fact, we are walking the talk. We actually made a commitment to buying recycled carts made out of the plastic we collect in our curbside programs. And this year, for the first time, our employees are wearing uniforms that are made from recycled water bottles and soda bottles. And they are extremely comfortable, and they look really sharp, as you can see from here. So using products made with post-consumer content is how we create recyclable programs. And we are doing our part by leading and actually buying those materials and using those in the products that we are using at the company.
Awesome. Well, you know, we've touched on a lot today, right? And I think it's important to mention that when we think about sustainability, to your point, it's a 360-degree approach, right? It's people, it's the community, it's the environment. And then how, as from a governing perspective, how do we become a leader in the space to continue to, you know, rising tides lift all ships, kind of set the standard on sustainability. And I'm so excited and thrilled that we had the opportunity today to present to, you know, the African American Mayors Association and the future partnerships that may come from today's conversation. And, you know, one thing that I will say is, I know we touched on a lot of stuff. It was only about 10 minutes. And so here's our contact information for Susan and myself. If you have any questions about any items that we talked about or want to partner on some of the initiatives that we mentioned, please reach out. Our contact information is on the screen. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Hello, I'm Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, and it's my honor to welcome you to the African American Mayors Association 2021 Virtual Annual Conference. What a relevant theme. Forward together, Mayor's vision for resilient communities. We know that the last year's tested us in ways that we could not imagine, but in so many ways it's brought us closer together. And thanks to the African American Mayors Association and our partners across the country, our communities are still standing, and we are turning the corner on this global pandemic. And in so many ways, we are beginning to thrive again. So I look forward to this conference, as I know all of you all do. And while we can't be together in person, I know that these virtual sessions will give us even more tools to make sure that our communities are empowered and continue to be resilient. Thank you for joining us, and I trust that you will enjoy this conference as much as I will.
"2020 showed us what mattered most: connection to the people, places, and traditions we love. But for the almost 17 million kids who suddenly weren't able to connect, it also showed how much work needs to be done. That's why AT&T is helping to make sure students have access to the high-speed internet they need to learn. It's part of our $125 billion investment to connect America. Join AT&T, and together we can help connect students to brighter futures.
Mayor Price, you're muted.
Thank you. Good morning, fellow mayors and distinguished guests. I am Mayor McKinley Price, President of the African American Mayors Association and Mayor of the City of Newport News, Virginia. It is my pleasure to moderate today's session on corporate social responsibility fireside chat. I'd like to thank AT&T for sponsoring this session. This morning, we will discuss the importance of forging stronger relationships with our business communities as we work together to address the social and environmental concerns of our communities. I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage Mayor Sean Patterson Howard of Mount Vernon, New York, and Malena Albright, AT&T's Assistant Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility. Good morning, people.
Good morning.
First, if you would, just give us an overview of yourself, your title, and what you're doing, just any opening comments that you may have.
Sure. My name is Sean Patterson Howard. I'm mayor of the city of Mount Vernon. I came into office in January of 2020, and being right next to the epicenter of the pandemic, by day 65 to 70, we were in the midst of COVID. So it's been an interesting year, but we're looking forward to coming out of this pandemic and forging ahead to new and greater things.
That's great. Ms. Albright, can you hear us?
I can. Are you guys able to hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you yet, though.
Oh, no. Let me see. Let me figure out. I think I need to get my VPN reconnected here, but I will go ahead and talk until I can get my video back up and running.
Okay, sounds good.
I manage our community and social investment work through AT&T Corporate Social Responsibility team. And with that work, my team is responsible for all of our work related to education initiatives to help make sure that underrepresented and underserved youth are served, to make sure that not only are they able to get a good education, graduate school, but also that we're able to provide philanthropy that allows them to get training that they need, to get workforce development, to get into good jobs. So it is a pleasure to be here today.
Well, thank you. And while you're working on your technology, I'm going to ask Mayor Patterson Howard, for your perspective as mayor, can you share examples on how the concept of corporate social responsibility has played a major role in the delivery of services and opportunities at Mount Vernon? And what was the impact on such partnership?
So being a smaller town, Mount Vernon traditionally has not had a lot of partnerships with major corporations, but I've worked in not-for-profit for the past 25 years and have had a lot of experience with corporate social responsibility. So we really started some new things this year in working with Verizon, in working with DoorDash, and working with our local banks to address especially hunger in our community. COVID really just exposed the deep fault lines that we already knew existed. But when COVID came and people were home and we saw how many children were no longer in school and not being fed and they were home with their families, hunger became a big issue. And so whether it was Verizon or MGM or DoorDash or some of our local banks, they definitely came out to work with us as a government and our not-for-profit agencies to deliver hundreds of thousands of home delivered meals, as well as to deliver millions of pounds of food through community food banks and food distributions. Hunger became a tremendous issue, as well as ensuring that our children who were home had access to the internet so that they could study from home and that their education would not be interrupted. I think hunger and ensuring that children had access to the internet and had the equipment to do online education were the first two areas that we really partnered with our local corporations around.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Albright, we can see you now. It's great seeing you. It can't be said enough that this past year has been unprecedented. How did AT&T and specifically your organization approach a response to the global pandemic through CSR and philanthropy?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm back. Thank you. Sorry about the delay. But
No problem.
as we all know, I mean, we've all weathered an extraordinary year this year, and our approach at AT&T had to be innovative and it had to be swift. So when schools and businesses started closing, I mean, who knew that it would be every school and every business across the country at the same time? We knew we had to be there for our employees, for our customer, investing in education for years. So prior to COVID, our focus was mainly on supporting organizations that help to improve high school graduation rates and expanded job readiness opportunities. And this was for young people across the country. But last year, when the pandemic left millions of students displaced from their classrooms and shifting to remote learning, we had to immediately pivot our focus. So my team jumped into action to create the $10 million AT&T Distance Learning and Family Connections Fund. That initiative gave parents, students, and teachers the tools that they needed for at-home learning. The fund also provided resources to maintain meaningful connections and bonding opportunities for those who were isolated from their families and friends. And as many of us know, like that initial period of not being able to go outside, not being able to connect with our relatives was really important. So I'm proud to share that through that fund, we supported more than 60 organizations, and that reached more than 196 million students, parents, and educators with the resources and programming that they needed during that unprecedented time. But as the pandemic and as school closures continued, we continued to see how vital connectivity is to successful learning. Unfortunately, we saw growing educational inequities. So consider these facts. In a recent study by the Alliance for Education, nearly 17 million students nationwide fall into the homework gap because their families lack high-speed access to internet and or they don't have adequate devices at home. So this doesn't allow them to participate in learning outside the classroom. And this problem is disproportionately impacting students of color, students with disabilities, and students who are in under-resourced communities. So the Bellwether Education Partners estimate that approximately 3 million students in the country did not experience any formal education, virtual or in person, since March of 2020. So let that sink in. 3 million students have been missing from the education process. So we felt that we had to jump in, and there was work that corporations like AT&T had to do to partner with nonprofits, with school districts, with government, just to make sure that we were serving that need. So we know that students with high-speed internet access participate in more learning activities when they're away from school. But for our nation's most vulnerable students, the digital divide has really put education in crisis. So building on that Distance Learning and Family Connections Fund, in November, we announced an additional $10 million commitment, launching a new collaboration with the nonprofit Connected Nation. And this will help to get free AT&T internet services and Wi-Fi hotspots into the hands of the students struggling or missing from schools. Through Connected Nation, we're supporting more than 120 organizations and schools across the country that will reach more than 35,000 students with connectivity. This program will most importantly target some of our nation's most vulnerable students. So think about those students who are in foster care, who are English as a second language learners, students with disabilities, or those who are experiencing homelessness. So this will allow them to have a Wi-Fi hotspot and a free data plan that allows them to take that connectivity wherever they have to go. So one of the programs that benefits is the organization Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, and they have an organization called Kids. It's a music program designed to create social change and to help nurture promising futures for youth who are in Baltimore neighborhoods. The nonprofit serves more than just students' musical learning needs, though. They step in to assist with challenges that students may have at home, whether it's food insecurity, housing instability, or lack of access to technology. So at the onset of the pandemic, we learned that students couldn't attend their program regularly because they couldn't access a stable internet connection. So through our Connected Nation collaboration, Kids was awarded hotspots to allow those students the opportunity to move past their difficult experiences at home and learn to express themselves and flourish through music. Another organization that we're reaching through this work is Cristo Rey Baton Rouge Franciscan High School. That this school is a place that approaches education a little bit differently than other schools. The high school not only has a rigorous college prep curriculum, they also have a corporate work study program where students take part in 1 day a week to help offset the cost of their tuition. Well, when classes moved to virtual last March, they were fortunate to be able to provide students with remote learning devices, but they quickly learned that some students had limited or no access to broadband when they went home. So through our program, they're receiving hotspots and free AT&T Wi-Fi service to help students connect with learning and career opportunities. And those are just two of countless examples of how connectivity is so critical to keeping our young people learning and preparing for their best futures. So overall, Mayor Price, this is how we have started to approach the issue.
I'm sorry, Mayor Howard, same question.
Same question. You know, what we've really seen, and Ms. Albright just expressed it, that the corporations have really stepped up and entered community in more innovative ways. Coming from not-for-profit, we always talked about time, talent, and treasure. And oftentimes people just look for corporations to share their treasure, to write a check. And a check is always good. So we'll never turn away a check. But you know, when corporations are able to use their expertise and step into a community, work with government, work with schools, work with not-for-profit organizations to create innovative responses to real social issues, they're demonstrating that they're a good citizen, they're a good corporate partner. And so whether it, like we said, was the access to broadband and allowing students who had been displaced to be able to connect and ensure that they could do their education through the feeding programs, we partnered with DoorDash. And, you know, DoorDash right now, you know, we were able to take some of our recreation and our Office of the Aging staff. And during the pandemic, they were able to deliver meals. But because the requests for meals more than quadrupled, we now need to bring them back into providing those direct services for our seniors. And so now how are we going to still be able to deliver thousands and thousands of meals a week? And so we reached out to DoorDash, and this is what they do every day. And so they've come together and they're partnering with our Office of the Aging and our Office of the Disabled to ensure that our homebound seniors, as well as those with other abilities, still receive their food without interruption, while our staff pivots back to reopening senior citizen centers and providing day-to-day services. We've been able to work with MGM, and MGM has come out and they are, especially as more people are being vaccinated, they've been able to come out into the community and do more hands-on work. So it's the check, it's the time and volunteering and working with our community and providing those direct services that makes a difference. And again, once again, you cannot discount the amount of expertise that those who work with corporations have. And so as we've been looking at reopening our businesses and working with our small businesses and our entrepreneurs, our corporate partners have come in and provided the type of technical assistance around marketing, around gaining access to capital, around pivoting and redefining yourself as a small business. They've provided that. We've been working with our corporate partners in identifying the new jobs that are coming down the pike, because we know that there are a lot of new job opportunities. And so we've been working with our corporate partners around reskilling our workforce, as well as upskilling our workforce. And helping people who might be in jobs that may not exist in the next 2 to 5 years, really identify what is a future career path for them. And that's been very important. The workforce development, the technical assistance that they're providing our small businesses and our entrepreneurs, and then also mental and emotional support. But one of the critical things I think that the corporations have worked with us around is really advocating and ensuring that our community, which is a small community, had equitable access to healthcare. We've been in the process of trying to save our hospital. Our hospital is scheduled to close, and as the Blackest community north of the Mason-Dixon line, we don't always have the political power to do this. So partnering with our corporations who now understand the importance of access to healthcare, and that their staff will be affected if our hospital closes, and that their staff have to have access to vaccines and testing and critical care, they've really stood alongside of us and have lobbied with our government officials locally, on the state level, and nationally to ensure that our community is receiving and has access to equitable healthcare opportunities and comprehensive healthcare.
Mayor Price,
Yes.
if I could jump in on that
Please.
too. I mean, I think Mayor Howard makes such a good point. So when everything happened, I mean, I have to give so much credit to our mayors across the country. I mean, especially African-American mayors, because when kind of the ground zero of COVID hit, I mean, you guys had to step up and really take the lead. I mean, you were already in leadership, but you had to take leadership to a whole nother level of figuring out how your constituents were impacted, what you could do to pivot very quickly, how do you use the limited resources that you've already had. So when it came time for corporations to, we all knew there was a problem, but I think many of us looked to the cities to help to organize us and help figure out, okay, where's the need? How do we get it where it needs to go? So, I couldn't let this question go past without giving credit to the mayors who have really had to step up and make a way out of no way with a lot of this issue. So,
if I could just step back in for a second, I think
Sure.
another thing that the corporations have really stood up to, we've been talking about the pandemic, but in the midst of the pandemic, we've been dealing with social justice issues, racial justice issues, immigration issues, and the corporations have stepped from the background and really stepped out and started speaking against policies and legislation and I wouldn't say small moves by some politicians, but they really spoke out and said, Black Lives Matter, immigration matters, equitable access to services, to education, to healthcare, making sure that people are stable in their housing. Those things matter. And they started not just to write checks, but speak out publicly. And it's very important because corporations often have marketing campaigns to say, come use our services. We care. But what we've been able to see in this last year are the corporations that really do care about the issues that matter most to us. And they've stepped up and they've taken a risk, because when you stand out and you start to express your convictions as a corporation on controversial issues, you stand to not only gain customers, but you also stand to lose some customers. And so thank you for lifting your voice and standing beside us and letting our communities know that you just don't provide a service to the community. You're not just here to make money, but you are now standing side by side, hand in hand with us, lifting your voices and fighting against some of the practices that we've really, really seen come to a head in the last few years. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you both for that. Great observations and answers. And to Ms. Albright, we also know that the digital divide creates significant gaps to access to employment and economic opportunity. Is AT&T addressing those needs at all through your efforts?
yeah, absolutely. Yes, we are. So as Mayor Howard pointed out, I mean, on the heels of COVID, I mean, COVID really started to kind of lay bare the issues and inequities for communities of color, specifically in Black communities. And so AT&T had already been working in the area of trying to make sure that we built all of our programming and our work on the foundation of social equity. But each year our company fills thousands of jobs, and we need a capable and diverse workforce ready to go on day one. And AT&T is not alone in this space. Business leaders across the United States and around the world are eager to find qualified employees with the training and education that's needed to compete and to thrive in our fast-paced global economy. So that's why we help provide access to education and training that students need to get and keep good jobs. So as a modern media company, we also recognize that skills gaps are not unique to one industry or one area of expertise. Advances in technology not only require a focus on hard technical skills such as coding and data analytics, but also require soft skills that technology cannot replace, including things like leadership, collaboration, effective decision-making. So for that reason, we're investing in programs that address the multidimensional nature of today's skills gaps to prepare people for career success in all the areas where we focus as a company. So think about it as careers in technology, careers in media, careers in telecommunications. Now, COVID has disproportionately impacted underserved communities, really exacerbating longstanding social inequities and higher unemployment rates. And we remain committed to investing our resources to drive lasting change where we feel it's needed most. So last summer, we identified, we knew that there were issues. We knew that we were already playing in that space, but we really needed to double down. So we announced our commitment of an additional $10 million to create an economic opportunity, and foster upward mobility for underserved communities. So this commitment included support for national work readiness programs focused on Opportunity Youth. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Opportunity Youth, they are young people who are under and unemployed between the ages of 16 to 24, who aren't in school, they aren't working, they're really just off track. So through our collaborations with programs like Youth Build USA, Jobs for America's Graduates, and Year Up, we help to get Opportunity Youth back on track. It also includes our employee-led AT&T Believes program. So some of the mayors that are involved in your organization may be familiar with AT&T Believes. So local teams with diverse backgrounds evaluate the most urgent needs in markets across the U.S. and help to decide where best to share their volunteer time and philanthropic support to make pathways to success. And finally, we're collaborating with the nonprofit Next Cubed to cultivate Black technology development and entrepreneurship at HBCUs. So through HBCU Founders Program with Next Cubed, we are providing mentoring and encouragement for students to develop business and technology concepts in the area of digital health, finance, housing, and education sectors. So our goal is to help get young people the skills and training that they need so they can get good jobs at AT&T or anywhere. Mayor Price, I think you're on mute again.
Muted.
I'm sorry, I had some noise in the background, so I was I'm on a port city here and something's happening in the port. Mayor Howard, how should mayors be thinking about engaging corporate partners more effectively?
Well, as I stated before, there are so many needs that communities have. And it's not just about the check, but how can we engage them and bring them on to some of our advisory boards within our communities? If you have a business development advisory board, how can we work with our corporations to utilize their expertise? They have accountants, they have marketing people. How can we connect them and start mentorship programs with some of our small businesses as well as our entrepreneurs? As stores closed and people couldn't get into their stores, there were still other ways that they could sell their wares, but many of them didn't have websites. And so working with some of the corporations around website development so that our local businesses could develop an online platform. Mount Vernon is 4 square miles, so we have a main street, a downtown, but we don't have big retail operations. And so it was very important for our small businesses to get online. It's going to continue to be very important for them to get online and have a larger platform. Another thing that we're doing here in Mount Vernon, and we've seen it start in California, is we are a community Mayors for Guaranteed Income. And Mayors for Guaranteed Income recognizes that many families across the country are living precariously perched on the brink of homelessness, utility disconnection, that just some extra money to help them with childcare or transportation will allow them to get more competitive jobs as they're able to travel maybe a little bit further away using private transportation as opposed to public. And so Google and Twitter have been very instrumental in helping Mayors for Guaranteed Income to get off the ground by providing seed grants. And what do we do with Mayors for Guaranteed Income? We are providing, here in Mount Vernon, we'll be providing over 100 families with $500 a month. That they can choose how they use. We're not paying their rent directly, we're not paying utilities, but we have to trust our residents to know how they need to utilize these monies most to ensure that they have stability. We have to give our community, which has been struggling, and COVID has made it even worse, an opportunity to receive help and still receive help and maintain their dignity. This is not about a handout, it's a hand up. And so as rent moratoriums end, we're going to see the increase in homelessness or people at risk of eviction and foreclosure. It's going to raise so much. So how can we partner with corporations and not-for-profits to provide support to many of our families who are going to be struggling? We have not yet begun to see the financial impact of COVID because we have been on a fiscal pause and a timeout. And so once the courts begin to open fully again, and once people can apply for eviction, and banks start moving ahead on foreclosures, it's going to be really, really important that we come together and find ways to solve this issue. And it's not just throwing money at the issue, but providing a consistent financial support to families who can utilize it and need it most. And these families, what we've already seen with Mayors for Guaranteed Income is that though the individuals who are receiving this money, they're using it responsibly. They're reinvesting right back into the small businesses in their community through transportation, paying their rent, buying food, buying clothing for their children, ensuring that their utilities are not disconnected. And so stabilization of our economy, stabilization of our community, and working with our families to maintain their dignity and their emotional health, because these are stressful times, are going to be very, very important. So corporations can support that. And again, working with our small businesses to help them remain stable, because they are hiring local and they're reinvesting directly in the community. There are a lot of opportunities for banks to do community reinvestment, and for corporations to really innovate with local governments as well as our not-for-profit community to really increase the social supports that are needed by so many of our residents, especially our Black and brown cities.
Great. Ms. Albright, just as a backup to the question, what can we have a lot of small town mayors in our organization. So what can these small town mayors do, particularly in building relationships with larger corporations like yours?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I just, as we've stated, earlier in the conversation, partnerships between corporations and municipalities is just necessary. As that companies are engaged in the cities where they live and work. So many leadership at corporations, your CEOs of your local corporations, but it's also important to build relationships with the people who manage community engagement.
Breaking up a little bit there, Ms. Albright.
And philanthropy, both on those initiatives.
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, it is.
A little better? Yeah, so I think that, we just have to be able to work together to collaborate and build initiatives. So when you approach local corporations, I think it's important to not only make sure they understand what the municipality's mission and goals are, who they need to serve, but also understand, what the corporation's missions and goals are as well, and try to use that as a common place to work together. Corporations want to help address issues facing the communities where we are based, and it just takes all of us working together to help move the needle, to make impact, and just make a real difference. I've mentioned our employee-led AT&T Believes program, and I think it's a really good example. It's a company-wide localized effort that creates positive change in our communities. It's led by our employees at AT&T. So through it, we're focusing on needs such as building job skills, Other cities, they're focused on homelessness. They're focused on access to education and careers, but this is all tailored to each community and the greatest challenges that they face. So we bring our employees generosity, we support it with company resources, and we join with collaborators, including community organizations and local leaders, to make an even bigger impact on local communities and society at large. So I think you'll find a willingness of most corporations in your cities to be very excited about partnering with you.
Great, thank you. And Mayor Patterson Howard, if this rescue package goes forward, do you see any impact on your communities with this as well?
Absolutely. We are working with our council and working with our community right now to identify what is going to be the most effective use of the monies that we're receiving through the rescue package. Small towns, like you said, small towns oftentimes are under-resourced insofar as our staffing infrastructure, but we have all of the same challenges as our larger cities, whether it's crumbling infrastructures, whether it's the increased need for public safety, ensuring that we are supporting our staff and able to retain them and not lose them to other larger surrounding municipalities. And so we are really looking at the American Rescue Plan and figuring out how we can get the biggest bang for our dollar. But we're also looking at working with our corporations. MGM, they have an incredible app where their staff, because many of your staff, they may not have high positions, but they live in our communities. And so they're tracking their volunteer hours of how their staff is giving back in the community. And so corporations can definitely incentivize their staff to be involved in their local communities as they represent their corporations. But when it comes to the American Rescue Plan, I think partnering with our community, but partnering with our corporations to see how we can leverage their support and leverage these dollars that we have to go a longer way. We're definitely looking at doing some expansion around broadband. So Verizon is one of our local partners. They have a hub here in Mount Vernon that serves our region, and we're having those conversations right now. We're not getting billions of dollars, but how can we spend the millions of dollars best to ensure that we have good connectivity, that our students have access, and not just our students, but our seniors. Because our seniors have been stuck at home and they've not been able to communicate with their families. And so how can we make sure that we are upskilling our seniors to feel more comfortable on these digital platforms so that they can reach across the country and have access? Because with closed senior centers and their inability to travel, the connectivity of our seniors and ensuring that our senior citizens' residences are wired properly and our seniors know how to use this new technology to maintain contact and decrease the mental health and depression and anxiety that we've seen amongst our senior populations is so critical. So organizations like AT&T and Verizon and Spectrum, we really look for you to partner with us also around reconnecting our seniors, because they still have so much to offer, but they don't necessarily have some of the access that those of us who use this technology every day have.
Yeah, Mayor Price, can I jump in on that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. This conversation just keeps getting back to the issue of connectivity and how important that is. And when we think about the digital divide, I have to constantly remind people that are in my circle that digital divide and homework gap is not a new problem. People have asked me, well, is this the right move for AT&T to go all in on digital divide and the homework gap? And it's important to remember COVID was not the cause of the digital divide or the homework gap. So once students return to school, once we're all back to work, once we're kind of back to whatever our new normal is, we will have the same problems with certain members of our community not having access and affordability of quality internet. So I would like to talk just a little bit about a program that AT&T announced earlier this month, where we will invest $2 billion over the next 3 years to help address the digital divide. So this renewed commitment to the communities that we serve combines AT&T's low-cost broadband service offerings with community investment. So this commitment is providing affordable broadband through AT&T's discounted service to K through 12 schools, colleges, and universities, as well as the emergency broadband or EBB program that will be administered by the FCC. So the part I'm personally most excited about, we introduced the AT&T Connected Learning Initiative. So this is a new commitment that will help reduce learning loss. It will help narrow the homework gap and will create compelling educational content for students. So this initiative will build on our previous investments and longstanding commitment to education to help make sure that we're connecting learners with the skills, resources, and opportunities that they need. This will include a learning platform. So together with our colleagues at Warner Media, we're developing a digital learning platform that will deliver high quality education content and curriculum everywhere today's students learn. So they can access it in the classroom, at home, in the community. It will be available on smartphones, tablets, laptops, and smart TVs. But in addition to curated content from Warner Media's movies and television library, this new platform will include learning tools from leading education partners like Khan Academy that will help students and families navigate the distance learning process and to hopefully improve their students' academic success. So imagine students watching the movie Just Mercy to reinforce lessons about the justice system, or learning about STEM curriculum while watching the movie Wonder Woman. So I think this will be an innovative approach to learning that I don't think exists in quite this way. But we're also going to be collaborating with local organizations to launch a pilot of 20 AT&T Connected Learning Centers in 2021. So these centers will be located in traditionally underserved neighborhoods where residents face barriers to connectivity. And to facilitate digital learning, we'll provide high-speed AT&T fiber internet, Wi-Fi, and ensure that those centers have the resources for devices like laptops and tablets, so to make sure that we're able to kind of cover that gap. So I'm really excited. I could talk about it a lot, but I know we're getting short on time. But I wanted to have a moment to just kind of share that with the group.
Well, that sounds absolutely wonderful. Is there anything I didn't ask, or anything, last comment you want to make, either of you, before we close out?
I'll defer to Mayor Howard.
Had to unmute. No, I just think, as we stated, there are a lot of challenges. Some of them are historic challenges, and there will be new emerging challenges, and we're just operating in a very volatile environment. And so it's building relationships, communication, building trust, and finding new ways to approach these historic challenges, and definitely push a reset button so that we can address some of the emerging challenges that will be coming down the pike. Communication and relationships are going to be critical at this time, and just coming to the table and finding solutions. We know that there are major problems that exist, but I believe this is a time of great opportunity. And I loved when you said earlier, Ms. Albright, you talked about opportunity youth, because that's asset-based language. And as communities of color and leaders of color, we have to make sure that we're not just talking about the deficits of our community, but we're talking about the incredible opportunities that exist for corporations to partner with us to develop solutions. And so we have to use that asset-based language. Yes, we have challenges. So let's change the discussion around challenges and say that there are great opportunities for us to partner around at least 25 issues to make an impact and a real change. And when you're talking about small towns and smaller cities, we are small, and it is an opportunity to use us as an incubator for great ideas, and to test out some of these new programs, because a considerably small investment in a small community can make a big impact. And then we can replicate that, and we could enlarge it in larger communities, and pare it down for smaller communities. So this is a great opportunity for partnership with smaller communities and developing new best practices that can be scaled up across the country.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to thank AT&T's Assistant Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility, Melena Albright, and Mayor Sean Patterson of Mount Vernon, New York, for sharing this important information with our audience. And I'd also like to once again acknowledge our sponsor, Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, for your support of AAMA. We're now going to take a brief intermission brought to you by Our Mayor's podcast, and our next session will begin promptly at noon on broadband infrastructure, sponsored by Comcast. Thank you all.
It's an urgent issue. I'm glad that so many have opened their eyes to see how large this issue is. It's not just about the digital divide. It's not an isolated issue. This is about opportunity divide writ large. And like I said, it's definitely disproportionately affecting communities of color.
They're just struggling because, they don't have the broadband capability. They don't have the connectivity that they're needed. You're finding people having to go to, your local service areas or restaurants to try and pick up, Wi-Fi for the kids. So it's something this country is going to need to address. I think we're at the point now where we see that Wi-Fi is no longer a luxury. It's going to be a necessity for us to continue to grow and prosper.
When we think about what is the purpose of church, we look at important elements such as spiritual maturity and evangelism and certainly community. Those are things that are very, very important. But also you look at the commitment of service and also growth in individuals. So it's going to take us a real concerted effort to make sure that we not only embrace this new environment we have, but we are able to navigate and look at it as an opportunity and not a hindrance, because COVID-19 is going to be with us well into 2021 and maybe even beyond. We're still all new to this. We're still asking questions. I mean, it has made a big impact on all of the cities in our nation, but certainly even in our churches. Churches have been the mainstay to many communities because they are providing these touchless opportunities for people to come and get basic needs such as food and hygiene materials where they can come and pick them up and go home and take care of their families.
I try to allow my role as a first lady and what I'm seeing within the church to inform me as I do my job on Capitol Hill in lobbying and trying to help shape policy that's going to benefit my community, as well as, even being an HBCU graduate. I work with HBCUs as their representative on the Hill as well. And so because I have a direct understanding and experience with these institutions, which are so vital and important to our community, then that impacts how I go about doing my job.
We can and must, as leaders who are Black and are focused on marginalized communities, those in our community who don't have enough, we have to be on the alert for misuse of any technological tools. But we also want to be and have a history of being, on the forefront of determining where technology can go, where we can leverage technology in order to meet the needs of our community.
This whole conversation can't be at 30,000 feet just around data and tech, but you have to humanize that data in a way that it makes a very direct impact on people's lives, on how they build their businesses, on how we prepare people for jobs in the future, really in a laser-like way, addressing the challenges of equity that exist, certainly here in our republic, but across the globe.
That's why we're getting the outcomes that we're seeing across the country, because it is very difficult for you to advocate for yourself with people who just don't see you as a whole person, and unfortunately often as an equal and someone who deserves the respect that any of their patients deserve. So even if you have the same socioeconomics, because of our ethnicity and the way we're seen, there will continue to be different outcomes if we do not change this system.
I was trained in the late 90s, and my embryology teacher said that there were three races: Mongoloid, Caucasoid, and Negroid. So for many people, when you hear them talking about health disparities, the reason they think that they exist is because they believe in a biological basis of race, because that was taught in our textbooks to nurses nurses to doctors to lay people for hundreds of years. And we know that there is no biological basis of race, that race is a social and political construct, not a biological one. So when you think about undoing the bias that's in our healthcare system, that means we must re-educate our providers, not just the ones that are currently in school, but the ones that are out currently taking care of patients.
We must work to fortify the pipeline for Black medical professionals by providing robust STEM education. You know, Hampton University is one of the leaders in providing students to go on to professional schools. We must provide funding for schools to train and retain medical professionals, and we must reduce student loan burden to encourage more community-based doctors and nurses.
The fact is that there is a disproportionate amount of testing in the minority communities. Part of that is because of the distrust that minorities have for the majority. Hampton University has the credibility. And if we can go out into these communities and provide that testing, and we're also trying to become someone that can provide the vaccine in those areas that I just mentioned, well, then we are doing a service. When I grew up, my mother and father told me that if you can do something to help somebody, that's one of the best things that anybody can do.
All right, let's get off mute. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, depending on where you are. I want to thank everyone for joining us, all of our colleague mayors and all of our distinguished guests. I'm Columbia, South Carolina Mayor Steve Benjamin. I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the host today, the moderator for ensuring digital equities for Black communities. This wonderful conversation is being sponsored by our friends at Comcast. I want to personally thank Tony Williams and the whole team at Comcast. They've been there side by side, arm in arm with the African American Mayors Association from our very beginning. So thank you for sponsoring this conversation. In our conversation today, we're going to discuss the National Urban League's Lewis Latimer Plan for Digital Equity and Inclusion and the importance of Black mayors' voices to ensure that all communities benefit from the broadband components in Congress's infrastructure bill. Joining us today, we have Edward Smitty-Smith, the managing partner at DLA Piper in Washington, D.C., and senior director of the Lewis Latimer Plan for Digital Equity and Inclusion. And we also have Joy Cheney. Joy serves as executive director of the Washington Bureau and senior vice president for policy and advocacy at the National Urban League. I'm not going to read the entire bios because they take up the whole hour, but it's easy to say we have two amazingly distinguished, still very young professionals who are blazing a trail. Edward Smitty-Smith is one of the leaders of DLA Piper's global telecom practice, advising clients on telecom matters and across the U.S. and across more than 50 countries. Served recently as a telecom subject matter expert for the Biden-Harris transition FCC agency review team, and obviously I mentioned the key role he's played in helping develop the league's Lewis Latimer Digital Equity Plan. He's had a wonderful career at both the FCC and the Department of Commerce, and is considered to be an amazing leader in this field. We're so happy, Smitty, that you decided to spend some time with us today. Joy Cheney, blazing her own trail, domestic legal policy expert, political strategist, former chief of staff to U.S. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York State. After leaving the Senate, she relaunched JOI Strategies, a consulting firm that develops strategies for organizations and companies seeking to achieve justice, opportunity, and inclusion in America's underserved communities, beginning with women and persons of color. A long career for a very young woman, I might add, but I'll leave that alone. But senior roles in the Obama administration, senior advisor to the chair of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, leadership roles at Planned Parenthood Federation of America, and the list goes on and on. Graduate of Howard University and Harvard Law School. Just really impressive team as I read through your bios. He was an old man, sees gray hairs. I don't know what you got there, Smitty. You bald. You might be hiding something, but he was an old man, a lot of pride as I read through your bios. But last month, the National Urban League unveiled a really exciting and comprehensive agenda for leveraging tools in the information economy to create a more equitable and inclusive society. You call this plan the Lewis Latimer Plan for Digital Equity and Inclusion. Why don't we maybe start off talking a little bit about who Lewis Latimer was, and then how does the plan create a framework for digital equity? And I'll kick it to you all. I'm not sure who goes first. Brother Smith, you're leading on this, and so I'll let you go first, and then Joy.
I almost always defer to Joy. So.
Okay, I was trying not to do ladies first because I'm not getting in trouble. I'm in a house full of women right now, so I try to make sure I watch up. So, Joy, why don't you go first?
Well, let me just say, Smitty and I have known each other for a very long time. We were in law school together, and I can assure you that we are older than we look. However, he's at least smart enough to not have hair on his head, and therefore you can't see the grays. First of all, I'm glad to be here with you. I bring you greetings on behalf of Mr. Mayor Mark Morial. He's sorry he can't be here because this is his crew. I will let Smitty give the background on Lewis Latimer, because the one thing I don't think you had a chance to mention was that he was the executive director of our Lewis Latimer project, and that predated my joining the Bureau. And I frankly think he's done an extraordinary job. So I want to defer to him and thank him again for his hard work on the project. And we look forward to talking to you about it today. But Smitty, why don't you tell them what was the inspiration for Latimer?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joy.
Yeah.
And Joy and I go way, way back, so we always like to joke. Well, and thank you, Mayor Benjamin. It's a real honor because not many people know this, but before my family moved to DC, we all came up from Columbia, South Carolina. So my family are Columbia natives. But to tell you a little bit more about Lewis Latimer. He was a Black draftsman, a soldier. He was a scientist. He was one of the giants of industry around the turn of the 20th century, who was overlooked in our history books, as are so many African-American giants of industry. But he was the man behind putting together the patent for Alexander Graham Bell's telephone. He worked closely with Thomas Edison. He was responsible for electrification of some of our major urban centers back then. He helped electrify and run electrical wiring throughout New York, Philadelphia, Montreal, London. So he is one of those unsung heroes. And we thought that it was appropriate, given the role that he played in that industrial revolution, to honor his contribution in talking about this current industrial revolution and the impact of broadband and internet today, and particularly with respect to communities of color and African-American communities. And what brought the Latimer plan to the fore, what was sort of its reason for being, was a recognition on the part of the Urban League of the importance of broadband connectivity today for communities of color, and where that falls in terms of the digital divide, how many communities are still unconnected today, the impacts that have on our everyday lives, as particularly catalyzed and exacerbated by some of the challenges and crises that we see today. Those crises principally being the COVID-19 public health crisis, the economic crisis that's spawned off from the COVID-19 crisis that has impacted the haves and have-nots in drastically different ways. The social justice crisis exemplified by the murder of George Floyd and countless others more every day. And the political crisis that we saw around the 2020 election in the last 4 years, frankly. And so, the confluence of those challenges compound what was an existing and long-lasting problem with the digital divide that had handicapped communities of color and prevented us from participating fully in today's economy and society. And so this was an effort to bring together some of the brightest minds in telecom policy and technology policy around this core social issue to provide solutions and to help bring together public and private partnerships to finally close the digital divide, something that has really been an impediment for many Americans, not just communities of color and low income communities, but many Americans for the last 3 decades. So this is a really bold project to put together sustainable and comprehensive recommendations, and that's what you have with the plan. And looking forward to talking to you about what we propose.
And let me just add one thing on Latimer is that, as important as he was, he did not reap the economic benefits that his bosses did. And so one of the reasons we named it after him is also one of the reasons we included one of the biggest sections in our plan, and that's on closing the business opportunity gap. One of the things the Latimer plan covers is, at the end of the day, we want broadband, but not just that. We want board roles, and we want supply chain contracts, and we want jobs for African Americans and other people of color. We want to make sure that, unlike Latimer, that they are able to reap the economic benefits of this current boom.
No, fantastic. No, and I appreciate the collective framing. It's right on point. I mean, we're talking about 1918, 1932, and 1968 all wrapped up into 1 year. Someone laid it out as almost an X-ray of American society that shows so many broken bones at one time. and how, in fact, and I really am thankful for the work of the Urban League in this space, because these conversations, though obviously accelerated, are not new for the Urban League. I mean, you've been very active in trying to frame, and now we have a wonderful sense of urgency and also some capital coming into the space to help fuel some things. So we're going to talk about deployment and adoption in a moment. But what you just said about economic access and economic opportunity and how that was denied, Lewis Latimer, I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about the role that that technology can play in access to the online economy that employs a diverse workforce, and what that could mean for greater business opportunities for communities of color. I know this is something that's been central to the National Urban League and its work around diversity and equity and inclusion. And more importantly, if you can tie it into what we as mayors and maybe working with the Biden administration can do to make these opportunities more real.
Well, I'll go ahead and start since Smitty covered the last question. For us, it's important to acknowledge that, while there is an ability to go in and I guess do things via phone or go in physically or what, no one does work like that. And we should not be expecting our businesses and our even just regular people, right? Whether they're applying for a job or whether they're applying for a business loan, to operate in that type of economy. When's the last time you ever had to go in physically, stand in line, and do that work? It's just something that you don't do. If you are a single parent, where would you get the childcare to do something like that? How would you do it if you were trying to transition from one job to another? It is vitally important that you have access to broadband, and not just via your phone. Although phones are getting fancier and fancier, you can't do everything via your phone. And so we want to acknowledge that. The other, and I would say that the other thing ties into also what mayors can do. One, like the president, on the first day in office, they created a racial justice executive order that asked all agencies to take a look at how they were doing their business and how government benefits were available. And we, at the National Urban League, and I think I speak for Smitty as well, believe this is also an opening for us to say, we have to make sure everyone can use online services in order to access government benefits. And then in order to truly be equitable, then we have to ensure everyone has access to broadband in the home. So that they can access these benefits. And so we're definitely making that as a hook. That is a promise made, and we expect it to be a promise kept. I think that as we look at the money that is flowing to states and localities, it's never enough, but it certainly is a lot. We have to make sure that as that is deployed, and making sure that mayors get that money, right? So not just states, but mayors get that money, that you all are doing that same kind of equity analysis. And not just the wonderful mayors here on this call, but mayors all over the country, regardless of party affiliation, that you're doing that analysis and you're saying, how are we making sure everyone can utilize our benefits, our services, that we are closing the gap of people being able to access. And the other thing we'd want to do, and we talk about this in the plan, is make sure people how to use the services. I'm sure many of you had to help your parents or your aunties get online to get their COVID vaccination. And even for those who would think of themselves as technologically savvy, even just the difference of a system can be can be a hindrance. So making sure that we're actually training people to get online. And then I know we're going to talk about affordability later, but Smitty, just anything else I think on that?
No, these are all excellent points, Joy. Thank you. And yeah, I think to a few of those, to this question of the original question about access and access to business opportunities that you mentioned, Mr. Mayor. We challenge in the plan that the federal government to go ahead and include in any infrastructure legislation that any companies that are going to benefit from stimulus for broadband deployment or broadband programs, that they are also including within their actions an attention to to digital equity and inclusion, and making sure that they're offering opportunities in an equitable basis to their subcontractors, to suppliers, that they're advancing supplier diversity. These are similar things that mayors can be doing as well at the municipality level, which is, to the extent that you're receiving stimulus payments to do broadband deployment, to the extent that you're part of that ecosystem, to be making sure that the private companies that are coming in and doing it for you are doing so in a way that's creating business opportunities for communities of color. And we think that you guys at the mayoral level are at the front lines of these battles, and every time we come across this question of, well, what needs to be done in order to make sure that broadband is being deployed in our cities, to make sure that people have access to it in our cities, to make sure people can afford it in our cities. The same question comes up, which is, what are we doing at the community level? What are we doing to make sure that we're getting input and feedback from the community level on the ground, so that we can make sure these dollars are being used in the proper way? And one of the ways that these dollars need to be used is in a way that is creating equity, not just in the consumption of broadband, but also in the business opportunity element. We have a lot of recommendations in the plan for making sure that we're doing the right kind of data collection, so that the next time around when when the dollars have to go out, if it's not collected, if it's not recorded, if we're not tracking it, then it's not getting done. So we need to make sure that we're coordinating with folks at the municipality level on actually tracking how the dollars are being spent. We've got a lot of recommendations about how to incentivize better use of this money, and I think mayors have to be a key part of that. Thank you.
No, the only other thing I would add is, I mean, we're thrilled that the administration seems to be thinking along these lines as well. If you take a look at the proposal that has been put forward, and even some of the ones that are matching it on the House side, there's a lot of public commitment and lip service being given to needing to give back to Black and Brown owned businesses and suppliers, both on the business loan side, but also just making sure that the dollars are going to those companies. But we want to make sure that happens. And I think that, we have a public commitment. We will be holding people accountable. But to Smitty's point, we have to have tracking of those dollars so that we see how they, happen going out the door. And also making sure that we're lowering the barrier to people actually accessing them. Because my greatest fear is that they'll put it out there. People won't sort of find their way to it. And then that's an excuse that the program doesn't work. And we want to make sure that does not happen.
No, absolutely. And I know that the National Urban League's been doing a lot of work in that space. I heard so much in what both of you just shared. But, our friend Senator Booker is always fond of quoting Deming, that in God we trust, everyone else bring me data. We manage what we measure. And if in fact you set some very clear goals for everyone to meet, and you incentivize them, or whether with positive or negative incentives,
carrot or stick, we'll take either one.
People will make it there, but you got to manage it and measure it, so this data can be used, and you can humanize the data. And I also agree, mayors and sit at the center of some significant gross metropolitan economies. I mean, regardless of the city or town that you may lead, that your vendors should reflect the values of your city. So the people that you do business with and the contracts that you execute with them should be reflective of your values. If you're a city that believes in equity and inclusion and second chances, or whatever it looks like, then that ought to be inculcated in your contracts. And it was important. You talked about the opportunity, Joy, of making sure people can access these opportunities. This session is sponsored by Comcast, NBC Universal. And it also supports National Urban League's Urban Jobs Program, which trains and places long-term unemployed Americans into entry-level IT positions. I think what a whole lot of folks, obviously dealing with the major issues we're dealing with today, is that we forget that the normal before the pandemic wasn't great. That as we were ready for the future of work, we saw several of our family members and friends, particularly those tapped in the two bottom quintiles of American society, not participating in the American economy, and the future of work was looking very grave and dim for them already. Now, as we have this K-shaped recovery into the new normal, a whole lot of folks are left that much farther behind. That's why work really to get people into these entry level IT positions so they can participate in the 21st century economy is so key. Any thoughts based on your work with Comcast?
Yes. So
what more we can do in our regions to help people connect with jobs?
Absolutely. So I don't know if it has been fully announced, so let me go ahead and do it here. We put it out in April. First of all, Tony is family at this point. Thank you to him. I know he supported this effort as well. We're just so thankful, to announce this collaboration that we had with Comcast that is really not just about the pandemic, right? I'm so glad that you said that, Mayor Steve, because the truth is these issues existed before. So Comcast has made a sizable commitment, $3 million investment to train workers, and I think about 6 cities throughout in the Urban League network: Chicago, Houston, Broward County, Greater Atlanta, Greater Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. So some of the most diverse and some of the largest. Hope maybe some of those, there's some representation, really some of those places perhaps on the call today. And we're aiming to make sure a couple hundred, I think maybe about 250 or so folks can go through this program, and on the other side can have not only training but actual jobs. And an interesting part is, Tony and I have talked about it before, but these are jobs that are great for folks from a range of backgrounds, whether or not they have college degrees, whether or not they have a criminal record. These are jobs that they can do from within their homes, or if they're driving a long haul trucking, as I know there was an example in Chicago. So traditional jobs that we would think of for these populations, but they're highly technical, and without technical skills, they would not be able to have those jobs. Jobs that once before were seen as not technical now are run by computers. And so the jobs that people thought they could access, they can't. We're now closing that gap and making sure that they can, in fact, access those jobs. These are good paying jobs. These are middle class building jobs. And so we look forward to seeing more of it. The National Urban League is partnering with Comcast. We're also working with other companies, but today we're just talking about Comcast. And we want to, we're thrilled at all the partnerships, because it's really an opportunity to give back in a real way and a tangible way, to touch people. It's not just public policy. It's actually saying we want to give you hard skills, and then we want to pair it up so you can actually get a job. And, we've helped, nearly 800 employees in this program over the last couple of years. So we're thrilled with our Tech Jobs program and thrilled that Comcast supported us.
That's fantastic.
And I would just say, it's also, this program, the Tech Jobs program is, it is, part and parcel of the same thing that we look at in the Latimer Plan. And we have an entire section of the plan looking at workforce development and jobs, and that sort of springs out of what we call these closing the utilization gap, which is, how is it that we can use broadband better? How is it that by giving access to broadband on a more equitable basis, that we can go ahead and create new job opportunities for those who don't have them, so that we can close that job gap and allow people who to gain the skills that they need through workforce development training online. To have access to the jobs of the future, or to make new changes in their careers and move in a new direction, to find the jobs. And for a lot of people, just finding a job requires that you have broadband. Training for a job requires that you have broadband. And so, closing the digital divide is important for a lot of different reasons. But, the utilization element of the plan, really, takes squarely on this issue of how do we make sure that we have a population that is, ready to compete for and participate in jobs of the future, and broadband has to be part of that.
Absolutely, and although that's not what this session's about, I will say that I really appreciate the deep dive into making sure that as we recognize that we're in a battle or war for the soul of this country or the souls of our cities, we cannot win this war with 70 million plus of our soldiers in the barracks.
That's right.
So many people have been carved out of the American economy for decisions they finished before they finished puberty, and in ways in which we can get everyone back into the American economy that sustains communities all across the board is so important. So
we want the Kavanaugh treatment. We wanted second chances, second chances. And here's the other thing. You said it. I said it, rather, you didn't. So the other thing is, in our urban jobs program, we are targeting people who are long-term unemployed. And unemployed, because I think that's really important. We're actually going where the need is, to Smitty's point about, and yours about, going where people need it most and where we can measure. And so there's a real benefit here, a tangible benefit. We are helping people who otherwise might be working at some wonderful company out there, but is not a highly technical field and is not an entry to the middle class.
No, absolutely. So thank you for your work. I think it's so important to the future of this country and its competitiveness. You both touched on broadband adoption, and I want to chat a little bit about the Congress's COVID-19 relief bill included about $3.2 billion to help low-income Americans pay for broadband service, and it's based on that the FCC officially established the emergency broadband benefit program. I guess this is in your wheelhouse, Smitty. It's going to provide discounts of up to $50 a month or $75 in tribal lands for broadband service for low-income households. Also includes a one-time discount of up to $100 for a laptop, a desktop, computer, or tablet purchase from certain providers. How's the Urban League working to help get the word out about this program, and maybe what mayors can do to help constituents sign up for the program?
Well, first of all, we're all holding our breath to see when it's going to be, released. It hasn't been released yet. I think we're thinking maybe not this week, next week, whatever. But whenever it's there, trust and believe. Urban League has already been in contact with the FCC. We're already offering our assistance to try.
When a Black woman says trust and believe, you better be ready. So.
I know my mother was being appalled. Sorry, I dropped the veil, I guess, a little bit.
I love it.
But I went to Harvard Law School. I can do whatever, right? At this point, say whatever I want. But what I would say is that we're very focused on engaging with them in terms of deploying this program and making sure everyone knows about it and really pushing them to be aggressive. From what I heard and from what I've seen and from what they've shared, they are being aggressive in their plans in terms of the rollout. And making sure people know about it. But I will say this, it is so important that we get this right. Because I've already heard folks saying, it's not going to be, no one's going to use it. And we have to see what happens here before we can make, greater commitments. We have to get this right. We have to make sure that everyone who wants to access the emergency broadband benefit that they know about it. If you are all interested in a greater investment, we got to show we can handle this investment.
Yeah. And I would just say to that, Joy's 100% right. This is of critical importance. The reason why it's an emergency broadband benefit is because we're in the middle of an emergency. People need access to broadband, and so the money needs to get out and needs to get into the right hands. And NUL, I know, will be right there, working hand in hand, helping to tie the FCC to the communities at the local level, and working with mayors to do it. I think you mentioned a point about the importance of broadband adoption. And I really want to sort of focus on that for a second, because it is so important. A lot of attention, a lot of energy gets invested in talking about broadband deployment. talking about how is it that we can build these networks out in, largely in rural areas, but how can we build new networks? How can we spend a lot of money in building newer networks? And there are billions of dollars that are going towards building new networks. And that's a very important thing. The Urban League supports it. The Latimer Plan emphasizes the importance of universal broadband availability and access. But it avails you not much if you have a lightning fast fiber network outside your door and you can't afford it. And so that adoption issue is key, because the biggest barrier to broadband adoption isn't whether or not you have a network that's there for you to use. It's whether or not you can actually afford it. And this is a particularly significant problem in communities of color and in urban areas, where frequently you do have very, very strong networks with very good speeds, but you have a population that can't afford it. And so the emergency broadband benefit exists to solve a problem that is acute and short in duration. And for that reason, it's a short-term program. But what we think about at the Urban League, and we've been spending a lot of time putting together proposals for in the Latimer Plan, is how can we go ahead and solve the long-term problem for broadband affordability for the populations that cannot afford it? And that is millions of Americans. I mean, right now, our numbers show that about 93 million Americans don't subscribe to broadband. That's a lot of people. Of the people who don't subscribe to broadband, in parsing the data, looking at the census data from the American Community Survey, we looked at it and we saw that about between 69 and 78 million Americans aren't subscribing for reasons other than the fact that there's not a broadband network, so what we're talking about is people who, for the most part, are not adopting because, and this is the single biggest reason, because they don't have the money to afford broadband. And so you have to have some sort of subsidy to go along with your broadband deployment program, to go along with the introduction of new competition. You have to have something that goes beyond that focuses on getting the absolute have-nots who cannot afford to and will not be able to afford to at just about any price point. And so, I think we offer a number of proposals in the plan to leverage existing programs, and leverage existing resources. And we also boldly call upon Congress to invest in making sure that people can afford it by putting more money into programs for a long-term benefit. That's what I mentioned.
Broadband is indoor plumbing and electricity.
It's 21st century infrastructure.
That's right.
It is essential, and that's so. The point you both just made, 3.2 billion sounds like a lot of money when it does finally start getting out of the door. But a lot of folks expect the emergency broadband benefit to run about 8 months. So I know that we, the African American Mayors Association, along with the National Urban League, recently signed on the letter to Congress calling for a permanent low-income broadband benefits, and obviously with great programs like Comcast Internet Essentials already in the marketplace in states like New York, requiring providers to offer low-income broadband programs. I guess it's easy for all of us to understand why this low-income broadband benefit is important for the long term, because once the money starts getting out the door, we expect it's going to expire fairly soon.
Can I say something though on that?
Absolutely.
Don't make any assumptions though about it. I want to tell you that that I've been hearing some betting against it and thinking that it won't be as successful. So I, like you, would assume like it's going to fly out the door. It's going to, it's going to go in the places that we expect it to go and where it's most needed. I think we have to make sure. I think we have to make sure, we have to do the work. And so I'm calling on all of you wonderful mayors who are best suited to make sure, to also make sure that your communities know about this benefit and that are using it, and that you are, especially the communities, targeting your outreach to the communities where it is most needed, perhaps even more than the federal government. So I want to just offer that admonishment.
Well, I know. Please, Smitty.
No. I was just going to say to touch on Joy's point. So there are existing broadband subsidy programs like the Lifeline program. Right, the Lifeline program. 90% of the Lifeline dollars go towards mobile. We propose reforms to the program, an expansion of the program to help target in-home as well, which we think is the most critical part of the digital divide. But to talk about sort of how important it is to make sure that like people are aware, that people know that the resource exists, that people are able to connect to it. If you look at the Lifeline program, you're looking at a program that has a subscribership of about 8 million people, but almost 30 million eligible to subscribe. Now, that is woefully undersubscribed. In some ways it works because unfortunately it's also woefully underfunded. And so if everyone who could subscribe to it did subscribe to it, it would crash the system. But to the point, there are programs that exist right now. Even taking a look at our host Comcast, right? Comcast Internet Essentials is a fantastic program, offers broadband at a very low price for low income users. And yet, I believe it's only about 57% of those that would be eligible to subscribe to it. So that's 43% that aren't subscribing to a service that would allow them to receive broadband for about $10 a month. So, actually getting people connected is a different thing from making sure that the resource that they need to connect is there. And we need the mayors and we need the community leaders and we need people all around the country sort of focused on that. In addition to expanding the programs, in addition to creating better programs, which are absolutely essential, in addition to making sure these programs are funded, we also have to get people connected.
So what I hear Joy and Smitty telling Steve and all the other mayors on here is that the future is subjective. I mean, that if in fact you have a desired future state for your community that really reeks of equity and inclusion, you gotta go make it happen. I mean, you gotta do the old school grassroots work and getting people not only educated on what's available, but obviously directing people throughout your community to take advantage of this. It's rare, and maybe a moment of just encouragement. It's rare that we actually have windows to discuss this. Usually mayors are sitting around, we're always wide open, just thinking about what we can do, the process of ideation and innovation and everything else. You go through that, but usually oftentimes I should say, depending on where you are, in a period of scarcity, we're not there. So now we have resources. We've got to be very intentional about how we connect these dots in a way that has long-term benefits for posterity.
That's right. And measuring it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because without it, it just won't happen. I mean, it just
right.
won't happen. I think the data shows us that. I'd love to have any more thoughts you have about obviously there are a number of different hurdles and challenges that help us get to a place of true digital equity. But I think continue to humanize the discussion around a $2 trillion infrastructure plan, broadband being a significant piece of it. And I think that might be maybe the only universal opinion that's come out of the pandemic is in fact that broadband access to the information superhighway, as it was called many moons ago, maybe when we started our careers, is now sacrosanct, a part of American infrastructure. Well, that's no longer debatable. If in fact we're going to be not only, if we're not going to thrive, but at least survive, we all have to have access to it. What else might we be missing beyond broadband deployment to also ensure that we continue to create more equitable communities? Anything else?
Can I add one thing? So last week, the Urban League and some of our sister organizations across different ethnicities planned an event on infrastructure priorities for communities of color. And it was really fantastic. I wish that you all could have been invited. We got to make sure your staff are on next time. But one of the things that came out when we looked at Asian American communities and Latinx communities is really the need for greater language inclusion. And so, as African Americans, maybe perhaps we don't think about that as much, but there are wholesale communities who really just we think our situation is bad. They really just don't have access. And even in the Trump administration, there were some benefits at the beginning of COVID that did not even have Spanish translation. And so, as we do this work and as the administration seeks to deploy the Urban League, we care about urban communities, African Americans, but plus. we want to make sure that we're also being an ally to communities who also need to make sure that they have translation services and that they can access benefits. And so I would be remiss to be on a call with the mayors and not mention that. And within the Asian American community, we're talking about a lot of different languages. So finding out a way that we can reach those communities and not leave them behind, I think is incredibly important.
No, absolutely.
And I'd like to second that and add one more thing. But we have an entire section of the Latimer Plan that is focused on civic engagement and focused on ways that governments at the national level, at the state level, and the local level, and in cities can improve the way that their constituents use broadband. And one of those is to recognize that oftentimes our government websites and our online government resources are the absolute last things to get updated online, or the websites that are frequently the cloggiest and the least user friendly. It's a nature of
they're terrible.
and particularly for populations that depend on disproportionately depend on mobile devices to access the internet. I mean, now one of the things that we're trying to solve and trying to close the digital divide, and one of the things we're trying to solve with the Latimer Plan is, helping get in-home broadband in every home. But for low-income populations and for communities of color, our phones are frequently our principal ways of getting access to online resources. And many of these online resources for local governments and for state governments, national governments are not mobile friendly. And so I tried to sign up for my parents through an online website for vaccinations using my phone, and it was absolutely impossible. Now, I had the good fortune of having several other siblings, because I come from a big family, all working on their laptops to do it, and we all happened to be, lucky enough to be connected, and so we were able to get the vaccination appointments. But if it had been just on our phones and that was the only way, wouldn't have happened. And that right there is a life or death type of issue. Yeah. So making sure that our local websites, that our local web resources are accessible for everybody, and mobilely accessible until we get to that wonderful point in time when we have in-home broadband for everyone is absolutely important. The last thing I'll say is to go back and reiterate a point that we made earlier, but I just want to emphasize again. Broadband deployment infrastructure is absolutely important, and we're excited and we're supportive of it. But if you can't afford what's there, it's not going to help you much. And for communities of color, not just African American communities, but communities of color, in particular communities of color in urban areas that you mayors out there, are working with and that are your constituents, the biggest impediment for those communities is affordability. And so as we see tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure spending, about to be used, sent out the door, you have to be right there pressing to make sure that as part of that, what we're talking about is the affordability question, so that it can actually do some good to the people that really, really need it. And those are people in your community. If it all goes to rural areas, or if it all goes to communities where affordability is not a challenge, then we're going to be leaving tens of millions of Americans on the sidelines. And really, the largest group of unconnected in this country are those who are unconnected because they're not adopting, and because they can't afford it. And so, we've got proposals in the Latimer Plan. We'll have other opportunities to talk about exactly how to do that. How to update Lifeline, how to expand it, how to create sustainable benefits and subsidies. But that has to be a big part of what you mayors are asking everyone for, and then making sure that people are held accountable.
I think it's amazing how consistent over the course of several generations of the message of the National Urban League has been, quite frankly. I mean, just as you summed it up, over 111 years working across demographic lines, making sure again that population that so often in political discourse gets left out is protected. Those in our cities and our metropolitan areas that oftentimes may not have the outside voice and political constituency that you might seek to achieve. So both of you in your last two comments summarize that very well. I know we're going to wrap this session up. I would be remiss if I didn't thank both of you. The two of you have blazed amazing trails in very short careers, I might add. And I can only wait and see where God's going to order your steps in the future. You're going to continue to do amazing things. I'd be very remiss if I didn't thank my brother, entrepreneur, lawyer, professor, legislative mayor, president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, CEO of the National Urban League, Mark Morial, for his continued leadership. Mark's a mentor and continue to guide us. So I want to thank him for his leadership. Thank both of you for what you're doing. Thank Comcast for supporting the African American Mayors Association, not just in this session, but again, Tony and you and the team from our very inception. We got a lot of important point in history. We can get it done. So Smitty, Joy, thank you again. And
thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
All right. God bless y'all. Take care.
It's an urgent issue. I'm glad that so many have opened their eyes to see how large this issue is. It's not just about the digital divide. It's not an isolated issue. This is about opportunity divide writ large. And like I said, it's definitely disproportionately affecting communities of color.
They're just struggling because, they don't have the broadband capability. They don't have the connectivity that they're needed. You're finding people having to go to, your local service areas or restaurants to try and pick up, Wi-Fi for the kids. So it's something this country is going to need to address. I think we're at the point now where we see that Wi-Fi is no longer a luxury. It's going to be a necessity for us to continue to grow and prosper.
When we think about what is the purpose of church, we look at important elements such as spiritual maturity and evangelism and certainly community. Those are things that are very, very important. But also you look at the commitment of service and also growth in individuals. So it's going to take us a real concerted effort to make sure that we not only embrace this new environment we have, but we are able to navigate and look at it as an opportunity and not a hindrance, because COVID-19 is going to be with us well into 2021 and maybe even beyond. We're still all new to this. We're still asking questions. I mean, it has made a big impact on all of the cities in our nation, but certainly even in our churches. Churches have been the mainstay to many communities because they are providing these touchless opportunities for people to come and get basic needs such as food and hygiene materials where they can come and pick them up and go home and take care of their families.
I try to allow my role as a first lady and what I'm seeing within the church to inform me as I do my job on Capitol Hill in lobbying and trying to help shape policy that's going to benefit my community, as well as, even being an HBCU graduate. I work with HBCUs as their representative on the Hill as well. And so because I have a direct understanding and experience with these institutions, which are so vital and important to our community, then that impacts how I go about doing my job.
We can and must, as leaders who are Black and are focused on marginalized communities, those in our community who don't have enough, we have to be on the alert for misuse of any technological tools. But we also want to be and have a history of being, on the forefront of determining where technology can go, where we can leverage technology in order to meet the needs of our community.
This whole conversation can't be at 30,000 feet just around data and tech, but you have to humanize that data in a way that it makes a very direct impact on people's lives, on how they build their businesses, on how we prepare people for jobs in the future, really in a laser-like way, addressing the challenges of equity that exist, certainly here in our republic, but across the globe.
That's why we're getting the outcomes that we're seeing across the country, because it is very difficult for you to advocate for yourself with people who just don't see you as a whole person, and unfortunately often as an equal and someone who deserves the respect that any of their patients deserve. So even if you have the same socioeconomics, because of our ethnicity and the way we're seen, there will continue to be different outcomes if we do not change this system.
I was trained in the late 90s, and my embryology teacher said that there were three races: Mongoloid, Caucasoid, and Negroid. So for many people, when you hear them talking about health disparities, the reason they think that they exist is because they believe in a biological basis of race, because that was taught in our textbooks to nurses, to doctors, to lay people for hundreds of years. And we know that there is no biological basis of race. That race is a social and political construct, not a biological one. So when you think about undoing the bias that's in our healthcare system, that means we must re-educate our providers, not just the ones that are currently in school, but the ones that are out currently taking care of patients.
We must work to fortify the pipeline for Black medical professionals by providing robust STEM education. You know, Hampton University is one of the leaders in providing students to go on to professional schools. We must provide funding for schools to train and retain medical professionals, and we must reduce student loan burden to encourage more community-based doctors and nurses.
The fact is that there is a disproportionate amount of testing in the minority communities. Part of that is because of the distrust that minorities have for the majority. Hampton University has the credibility. And if we can go out into these communities and provide that testing, and we're also trying to become someone that can provide the vaccine in those areas that I just mentioned, well, then we are doing a service. When I grew up, my mother and father told me that if you can do something to help somebody, that's one of the best things that anybody can do.
Good afternoon, fellow mayors, and all of our distinguished guests that may be with us today. It's an honor for me to have such an opportunity. As I think about public safety and think about where we're headed, and over the past, I don't know how many years, and it seems that the more emphasis we put on it, the more need there is for something to be changed. So today we will have a session to talk about where we are and have some people that will join us to talk about things that we can do and what we ought to do that we can be made better when it comes to safety. I'm William Johnson. I'm the mayor of Holly Hill, South Carolina, and also serve as the Secretary for African American Mayors. So it's a pleasure for me to serve as moderator today. Thank you all for giving me an opportunity. So for today's session titled Re-Imaging Public Safety, we will be discussing how communities and local governments can work collaboratively to come up with best practice for community safety. I would like to, at this time, thank our sponsors, Cities United and Casey Foundation programs for the continued support of AAMA. As I think about the Cities United, and if we go back a few years back, 6 or 7 years, this is an initiative that Anthony and Mayor Nutter and Mayor Landra has put a lot of emphasis on over the years, and I've been working toward this. So they're probably, those two will join us as panelists. They probably is as much up to date on what's going on and what needs to be changed. So I'm glad to have them to join us. So participating on the panel today, we will have Anthony Smith, again, Executive Director of the Cities United. Thank you, Anthony. Mayor Sharon Broom from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Thank you, Mayor. And also we have from the advisory board, former Mayor Michael Nutter. Well, there he is. Yeah. Oh, that's good to see you. And as I said, as I think about this conversation and have this conversation with this group, I'm truly looking forward that at the end of the day, we'll all be made better and we can go back to our respective cities and towns and continue this work. So again, thank you all. I'm going to ask that each of you give us a couple opening remarks. And I'm going to start with Mayor Broom. So give us a couple minutes of opening remarks, if you would.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor Johnson, and to my fellow panelists, my good friend, former Mayor Mike Nutter, as well as Anthony Smith, who has been working with us in this space from Cities United. I will tell you that the topic at hand, reimagining public safety, is certainly extremely relevant in this day and time and this season, I would say, in which we are in. And so while there are certainly many spokes in the wheel of public safety, it's my hope that we as mayors can certainly touch on some that we deal with on a daily basis in being innovative and creative in the public safety space, but recognizing we have to think differently in terms of where we are in the 21st century. And also recognizing that it's going to take, I should say, a deep dive of intentionality to resolve many of the issues that our communities face. So I'm delighted to be on the panel today.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Mayor Nutter, if you would.
Sure. Mayor Johnson, thank you very much. And of course, Mayor Broom, always good to see you. Anthony Smith, making things happen. I'm just thankful to be a part of this conversation. And Mayor Johnson, I appreciate the kind things that you said about Mayor Landrieu and I, and certainly Anthony, but the real work gets done by all of you on the ground. I now have the good fortune you'll experience it too, of being a former council member, former mayor, former president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and the former seat is a pretty nice seat. But even then, we all have to decide how we want to spend our time. And there, for me, no more important issue than public safety, and especially as it relates to Black and brown people, people of color across the United States, both in the civilian space, the day-to-day activity that goes on our streets, and certainly as we continue to experience, it seems almost daily, officer-involved shootings and other negative consequences that Black people and people of color are experiencing on the streets of America, as often they have reason or cause or circumstance to be involved with law enforcement across this country, and how we bridge those gaps, how we fill in some of these divides and get serious conversation going. But also, I think we start right here with the title of our program today, Reimagining Public Safety. Anthony knows that, and some others, I've tried to take policing out of my language, and I like to talk about public safety. What does public safety mean? That I can walk down the streets, that our kids can play, that seniors can go to, worship service or a doctor or a supermarket or whatever, and not have to worry about the next bullet flying down the street or something else. And so we do need to reimagine public safety in America. We know where it came from, the construct of police departments. So we know some of that history. Maybe others need to learn it. But then understand what do we want to do in the 21st century and moving forward, and have a different relationship with those who serve and risk their lives every day to help make sure the rest of us are safe. We have got to get over these challenges. And I think that there are solutions that are ever present. We just need to listen.
Okay, thank you. And as we move forward, we'll talk about some of the challenges and some of the roadblocks.
Yeah.
So at this time, Anthony, will you give us a couple opening comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Johnson. And I also want to thank the African American Mayors Association for their partnership with Cities United and for always creating the space for us to have these dialogues. Always a pleasure to be with Mayor Nutter and Mayor Broom. The last place I got to travel to was Baton Rouge to be with Mayor Broom, and it's been a long time. So looking forward to getting back down there. So,
yeah.
And I think as you heard from both mayors, this ideal of public safety is flawed the way we currently deal with it in this country. And it's flawed because of institutional racism. And then as you heard from Mayor Nutter, the construct of it. And it is bigger than police. It's bigger than police because when we think about public safety, we got to think about all of those things that interfere or intertwine with people's lives on the day-to-day, from police to jails to detention centers and all the other things.
I think you froze.
You're frozen. Can you hear us? Mayor Nutter, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I think he may have dropped. It looks like he's back. Anthony?
Yeah.
Anthony,
you were frozen there for a while, man. So Anthony, can you hear us?
Then I can, yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you were frozen there for a little bit, so we didn't hear much of what you said.
No, that's fine. Thank you for that. Now, I would just say, and again, forgive me on that, we just got a lot of work to do. Both mayors covered it. Looking forward to the conversation. We just got to really, as a country, understand that the current public safety system and structure that we have does not work for all, and it actually destroys and hurts a lot of families. And we need to shift that model and really think differently about it moving forward.
Well, thank you all for the opening comments. And as we move forward, as you all know, for the last, I don't know how many years, we spent a lot of time listening at a lot of opinions. And today we simply want to hear your vision for what you think that personal vision for public safety. And in the roles that you are today, what can you do and toward this vision that you have? Oftentimes we'll have a vision, but we can't affect it, impact it one way or another. So tell us about what your personal vision is and how what you do and what your role is in the communities and all that you can do to help get this done.
Well, Mayor Brown, you're in office, so
let's start with Anthony.
Yeah, I'll start because I'm in the thick of things,
That's
right?
right.
You might say.
Right in the middle.
But I will say when I started, took office in 2017, I immediately began a time of reflection to create a vision for this city. And the vision that I came up with is that we are creating a community of peace, prosperity, and progress for every resident in this community. And this is indeed inclusive of public safety. So let me break it down very quickly. Peace, our residents are not navigating our community with a sense of fear, that whether it's related to public safety, economic uncertainty, health, and everything in between. So that's peace, prosperity, that our residents have the opportunity to thrive within their community. And progress, of course, our residents have the opportunities and resources to grow and progress farther than ever before. And so I'm glad that right now we have embraced what we call our Safe, Hopeful, Healthy program, which is certainly couched within these parameters. Anthony is familiar with it. And this Safe, Hopeful, Healthy program is my public wellness framework that addresses the underlying causes of health disparities such as poverty, economic development, and education through the lens of the social determinants of health with the purpose to reduce violence. And so safety is not just the reduction of violence, it is the atmosphere in which people feel safe and can thrive. And so we're talking about stabilizing our youth and our family and community, reimagining public safety, utilizing community-based public safety strategies, reimagining public safety, creating an equitable community development, reimagining public safety, and expanding health in all policies, reimagining public safety.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said earlier, all of us are excited about talking about law enforcement and what we think could be done and what our vision is. So who wants to be next then?
Well, I want to pick up where Mayor Broom was. This idea that, safety is not the reduction, is not just the reduction of violence. Safety actually should be the absence of violence. We have to really not just imagine, but make happen. We have to dispel the almost the assumption that there's either always going to be violence, or we just kind of have to accept it or deal with it. I mean, I'm not speaking in a Pollyannish, kind of make believe world. I understand. I mean, we can go back to Cain and Abel. I mean, somebody's always doing something to somebody. But there are circumstances and conditions that not only can it, quote unquote, be reduced, some of it just shouldn't exist. And so when I look at I think most people know I'm born, raised, educated, created all my trouble in Philadelphia. So when I look at the logo in the shield of the Philadelphia Police Department, the insignia, what's on the vehicles, it's honor, integrity, and service. I want us to live up to those ideals. We're going to serve with honor. It's going to have integrity, and we're going to provide service. It's complicated to do. I don't mean to make it sound so simple, but I mean, that's the ethos of the organization. That's what's on the patch on the officer's uniform. That's what's on the side of the car. Honor, integrity, service. Let's start with that. Police Commissioner Ramsey, who I had the honor to serve with, and many of us see him and have known him Chicago to DC to Philadelphia now, a top commentator on television. He would talk about the need for openness and transparency, and that you have to set certain standards of what is acceptable. And he demonstrated that each and every day. I learned so much from him. But, we have to create an environment where folks do feel safe. As the old saying goes, if you don't feel safe, you're not safe. Statistics are not the start and the end of the story. I mean, I could tell you about this reduction, that reduction, the other reduction, but if you heard gunshots last night, if your children are jumping in the bathtub trying to avoid getting hit, then you don't feel safe, no matter what the numbers say. That at graduation, police officers coming out of the academy, he would tell the officers, treat people on the street the way you would want your family member treated. Just keep that in mind. And I'm not saying that everybody's a cooperating person. Remember, as citizens, and we can have a conversation about, what we call the police about, but, some circumstance happens, 911, a little bit of information, everybody's excited. Here's a person with a gun, a badge, maybe sometimes a taser, or a baton.
Okay.
And we want them to deal with every situation out here in these streets that folks could not imagine. And we're not seeing people sometimes on their best day. And in the current environment, I'll close with this. I know, Mayor, you're trying to moderate, but it's going to be tough with the three of us.
I knew that.
Right. But
yes, we're fine.
We're seeing increasingly citizens, because of many things that have happened, not just recently, but over time, they're nervous and afraid. And I think increasingly the officers are nervous and afraid. When you put those pieces together and then people around and the wonders of technology, put all of that together, it's an environment that almost creates a sense of dismay and agitation. And so we got to focus on that.
Okay. As you were talking, I was reminded that when I became mayor, I was asked to go to the graduation of a police officer to the academy. And they got to this that says Code of Ethics. I thought we had just made a bishop or somebody. It's really something as they go through what they're expected to uphold.
Right.
But not only just that badge that you see, if you read the Code of Ethics, for those, and I remind mine sometimes, I said, now we got to uphold these on a daily basis. So it's out there. We just got to get the good things out that we have and take away the bad things and do something with our training. But again, I do understand that all of us could talk about how we do this policing and how we could do law enforcement different and how public safety. So I agree that we will be flexible and allow you all to. Yes. Okay. So
see, Mayor Broom, you see, when you're a former, you get a little extra dispensation. See what happens. That's how that works.
I see.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mayor. And I love listening to Mayor Nutter and Mayor Broom and being a part of the conversation. I think for me, when we're talking about reimagining public safety, we actually got to get to a place where we are okay that law enforcement and police even looks different. Right, we as a city and as a country put a lot of our resources there, and we have not gotten outcomes that we desired. Right, so when we talk about reimagining public safety, in my mind, it's like where are we investing our dollars and where are we investing our time? And as you heard both Mayor Nutter and Broom talk about this, and those safety nets that family needs, right? Affordable and safe housing, access to quality education. Opportunity to work at jobs that pay a livable wage, being able to walk through your neighborhood, being able to go buy food in your neighborhood, being able to go get health care, both physical and mental, without having to, go through a whole lot of hoops to do that, right? So where we invest our resources really help us understand what we value. And we, in my opinion, have not valued public safety for all in this country. And that's where the shift is coming in at, where we're asking folks to think about this differently and really focus in on those families who don't even feel safe when police ride through their community. No. So I think that's the hard conversation we got to have, is that police actually bring fear in some people's lives just because of their presence.
Yeah.
We have been watching young people in ask for SROs, school resource officers, to be taken out of their school because they just don't feel safe. So until we start addressing those issues, public safety is always going to feel different for different pockets of our communities. And law enforcement is not going to be seen as a partner, but more so as a part of the system that makes it hard for folks to feel safe. So I just think when we have this conversation, and you all know, that's what Cities United has been trying to have for the last little while, is what does it look like and what does it mean? And how do we push ourselves to be okay with it? We might have fewer or less, or some might have not none, police officers in the long run, because we got different people who will respond to different issues, because we don't always need a badge and a gun to respond. Sometimes we need a mental health worker and somebody who can help there.
Okay, well, thank you all. We'll move to our next question. It's evident that each of you are doing things to try to change, and as you go through your day-to-day work trying to make these changes and reimagine public safety, what are some of the roadblocks or some of the challenges that you encountering today? Let's start with you, Mayor Broom.
Yeah, well, when I took office in 2017, our community had just been through one of the most traumatic years in the history of Baton Rouge. In fact, I was running for office during that 2016 year. We had the officer-involved shooting of Alton Sterling. We had the ambush of police officers, and then we had a great flood. You talk about a traumatic year, it was extremely traumatic. But what we did, when I had the privilege of serving as mayor, we started working on one of the top priorities, which was policing, trying to close the gap between our police officers and the citizens of our community. I gathered a group together of stakeholders. We worked on use of force policies. We looked at other policies. We purchased body cameras. So we started making transformation. And part of that transformation was the hiring of a new police chief. And that police chief, Murphy Paul, my police chief, has been really working to reimagine policing and moving our department towards 21st century policing. So what roadblocks have we come up again? Have you tried to change a culture that's been in existence for about 138 years of policing, and trying to get folks to embrace a different vision? I will tell you that, and I have been vocal about this before, it's a challenge. And I know it's a challenge in other cities, that many of our barriers within our department stem from the pushback from our police union. And so, I've said that before. For some, it's a pretty bold statement and surprising statement. Whoa, you're going to talk about the union, but I am. They have been an obstructionist to our reform or reimagining efforts, if you will. I will tell you another challenge that we have is working to recruit and maintain the best officers that are available. I never will forget, before I became a mayor, 100 years ago, I was on the city council here in Baton Rouge. And I remember visiting a city, I'm not going to name the city, with a police chief there who was noted for the work that he was doing. And I remember him talking about the competitive salaries that he had for his officers, and that most of his entire department was college educated, with other officers pursuing advanced degrees. So the mindset and exposure of your police department has a lot to do in how they police. And so we need officers. We need officers who call our community home, who have exposure, who are educated, who have respect for people, and are a good representation of the community that they serve. So these are just a few of the challenges and roadblocks that we've faced as we've been working to implement our vision of public safety here in Baton Rouge.
Yeah. Well, thank you. As I think about what you just said, even the hiring of police officers, I've been from a small town. I never dreamed that I'd have an opportunity to actually interview, hire, and the police chief reports to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenges is just as it is in manufacturing or anywhere else. It's just tough for folk to come to work and do what we think they ought to do. You know, we put all these things in place. So it's been a challenge for me. I know what they go through. Same things you said, not being able to hire those folk that we think bring the skill set that will get the job done. So consequently, you hire who you hire, and the quality of work is who you hire. Oftentimes, we don't have time to develop them. Small towns, we hire them. By the time we start developing, they quit and leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But again,
and would you indulge me one more minute, Mayor Johnson? This came to my mind and I have to say it, is that I believe one of the roadblocks too is a mindset of we against them. What do I mean by that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I mean that when you talk about transforming and reforming, it is not anti-police. It is not, you're speaking against the police when you talk about reimagining policing or reforming policing. And unfortunately, there's a segment in our community across the nation who feels that anytime you talk about reforming police or reimagining a police department or changing a police department, that you are sending an anti-police message. Absolutely not. Just like you said, Mayor Johnson, in any business, corporation, you've got people who get it, who get the work done, who embrace the vision, who know the mission, and who do excellent work. Then you have some that don't. They are obstructionists. And so we've got to face that in America too. We've got to be willing to say we want a 21st century police departments all over America. We want police who really, as Mayor Nutter said, embrace the ethos of what their departments are about. And that will take us, light years ahead if we have that. But we've got to stop this mindset that exists among some citizens that, when you talk about reform, you're against the police. Absolutely not. I'm for the police and I'm for you. And I want to make life better for all of us.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah. Mayor Nutter?
Sure. No, it's absolutely, Mayor Broom is absolutely correct. And in the first time we met in Baton Rouge, we had many of these kinds of conversations, and she was really going through, she and her team going through some challenges at that time. Again, it's not anti, it's pro-citizen. Step back for a moment. There are 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States of America, most at the state and local level. Standards and practices, consistency across national standards. I believe that there should be national standards around a variety of things like use of force, de-escalation. Who said that 40 weeks or so is the amount of time that sometimes or less that recruits should be in the academy? When we look at some other professions and law enforcement, public safety is a profession. We may need folks to be at that academy longer. Well, that costs money. I get that. To change the training may cost money. The question gets asked so many times, why are they so quick to pull out their weapon? Well, part of the reason is that the gun is often what they are trained on the most. That's the thing that they also have to go back and get recertified. So it's human nature. You're going to use the thing you know best, right? As the old saying goes, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If all you're going to rely on is your gun, then the moment something happens, right? We saw it just with the young man in one of the most recent shootings, Deanna. The officer says, or the police chief said, thought they had one thing, ended up with something else. If you're watching a video, it is crystal clear in that moment, but it's a moment of excitement that is not a taser. Guns are generally gray or black. Tasers are orange and yellow. They're usually on a different side of your body. I mean, there's so much that goes on. And yes, these are frightening moments, but some of it is also about stepping back for a moment and saying, like, what are we doing here? What are we really doing, right? We know who this person is. We run their tags. Do we need to shoot after them? Do we need to chase after them? I mean, all of this stuff. A lot of it is just the adrenaline in the moment. Yes, our police unions do need to step up. I had a very direct and very clear relationship with the leader of the police union in Philadelphia. We generally got along. Things that we disagreed on, we just disagreed on, curse each other out and move on to the next thing sometimes. But, he would say, and look, they get elected like many of us on this screen get elected. And he would say, well, I have a membership and I represent them and elections coming. I'd say, well, I understand that. Well, I get elected too, and my electorate is bigger than yours. And as a matter of fact, all the people who voted for you are also my constituents as well. And so at the end of the day, you want to make sure that if there is an encounter, if there is a stop on the streets, in a car, whatever the situation is, generally, everybody should be able to walk away from that alive. Somebody may be arrested. They may be in custody, whatever the case may be. The officers want to go home to their families. Our family members want to come back to us. And so, again, the mindset is to protect and serve. We've got to get away from the warrior model. We've got to move into the guardian model of what public safety is all about.
Thank you. Anthony?
Only thing I could add to that, because they hit all the points, is that I think our mental model of what public safety is and what law enforcement is one of the barriers that we have. We have been indoctrinated with this is the model for so long that we can't move past something different, right? So when the mayor talks about let's reform and reimagine, it's so hard for people to do that because this is the thing. And this is the thing that, and if we want to really get clear and honest, where white folks have really felt safe. This is a thing that has kept them safe across the country. It keeps people out of there. It keeps their property safe. It keeps people out of their communities. All of the things that is so hard for them to reimagine what would it look like if this wasn't the model anymore. And so that's the hard thing. And I also think part of this ideal that makes it hard for Black folks as a collective to really buy into this current model is there's no accountability, right? We see what happens across the country. Even what's happened to the young lady, Makiba, I think her name is, in Columbus, Ohio, who the 13-year-old who called for help and ended up dead by the police. We don't know what that trial is going to look like, but there's so many times when officers are in the wrong, are not held accountable, not by their peers, not by the system, or any of the things that's in place. So this ideal of what this is just needs to shift and change. So I think I agree 100% with the police unions. They either need to step up or get out of the way, one of the two. I don't know what it is, but they hinder a lot of movement because they're so committed to protecting even those that they know are in the wrong. And that hinders the profession and it hurts the profession. If the profession is going to stay, then they need to get that in check. Or they're going to continue to have people push back because of the way that rolls out.
So as we move forward, we don't have a lot of time left, but a couple things I want you all to talk about, and maybe we'll just say, answer these two questions as you talk. And I think you got a couple minutes each, not long before it's time for us to move on to the next session.
Such a diplomat.
And I think Anthony kind of touched on it. And why is it so hard for us to get away from the present system? And while you're telling me that, telling the audience that, think about all the money that's coming down from the new administration. What are some of the things that we could do with that money? And I think it'd be very appropriate for somebody to talk about putting some into public safety. But anyway, y'all got the two questions?
Yes, we do, Mayor.
All right, y'all, don't you all haven't beat me up now.
No.
Let's be brief and get it done so we can get out and get ready for the next one again. Okay, Mayor Broom.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Anthony. This is a good connection segue to what Anthony talked about. You know, tradition and comfortability are the largest factors when it comes to barriers in terms of changing our public safety practices. You know, why is it so hard for us to let go of our current version of public safety? You know, the first centralized police force was established in 1838 to allegedly protect and serve. That is 138 years of policing in the United States. And I don't have to take you back even farther in terms of the origin of policing in America. Many people, especially where I live here in the Deep South, are opposed to changes within the institutions shaping our society. Anthony said it very, very clearly. That's where they feel comfortable. That's where they feel a level of control, especially in our non-communities of color. And, you know, for them, that's their folks. You know, the police are part of the fabric of their community. And so it's important for us to, however, not let that be a deterrent. I think we have to continue to push for progressive community-based public safety strategies. And you noticed, you mentioned the money. You know, I thought it was really a good move when some of the CARES Act dollars came down, that they were designed and said you could use them for public safety. Because recognizing some of the issues that emerged out of the pandemic around public safety. Last year, there was a peak in violent crime all across America, in cities all across America, and much of it has been attributed to COVID-19. And so now these COVID-19 dollars, these CARES Act dollars, have the flexibility to use them for certain reimagined public safety initiatives, such as what we're doing here in Baton Rouge with our Safe, Hopeful, and Healthy initiative. We're using CARES Act dollars to stand that program up.
Thank you.
Well, there's more money coming. And
Yeah, it is.
I'm not going to steal Anthony's thunder because he deserves tremendous credit. But we can't let this moment pass as these dollars come down to do exactly what this panel is talking about, is reimagining public safety and the kind of investments that need to be made. I know there's a lot of language out in the public about I guess I would say it, defund. I think of it more as refund. We need to figure out where there are savings to be made in these various departments, and then invest those savings into other services. I don't want to say merging, but certainly a more strategic coordination between the public safety department and the mental health and social service agencies. We need to embrace that. The investment in certain types of equipment. We may need to increase or lengthen the amount of training that the officers receive, not just recruits in the academy, but all of them. There are so many of these instances. I'll conclude, Mayor Johnson, but so many of these incidents, these tragic incidents, have come on the heels of things that were just not that serious. Eric Gardner was selling loose cigarettes. Michael Brown was standing in the middle of the street. Jacob Blake was just going around his car. I mean, he survived. I mean, but seven gunshots, and we know the George Floyd story. Possibly a counterfeit $20 bill. I mean, these are not life and death situations. No one should die or be severely injured from these kinds of incidents. So this is about stepping back for a moment, evaluate the situation. What's my training? You know, I know they should know how to fight or engage in defensive tactics. The young lady who was just shot, I mean, okay, yeah, she had a knife. The officer probably had a baton. I don't know about anybody here. If you've ever been hit by one of those things, it will knock you down, but she would have survived. And so it's in that moment. And look, I've never been a police officer. I lost 8 officers killed in the line of duty when I was in office, and those are some of the worst days you will ever experience. So I've seen it. I've seen it on both sides, but we really do have to reimagine all of this. And yes, it will be uncomfortable for many, Black or white, Latino or Asian. Yes, it will be discomfort, but there's possibly no greater or worse feeling than your family member dead. None. And so that makes it worth the effort here.
Okay, well, thank you, Anthony. You and I have 3 minutes to share.
I won't take long, Mayor, I promise. I would just add, this is going to be the conversation that this country needs to have if we really truly want to be who we want to be. This is one of the issues that has been holding us back for far too long, and we have not put all of our safety first. And until we do that, we're going to continue to have this conversation. I believe that we could really, really think about how we spend our resources, where we spend our resources at. And I just think mayors have that leadership role, and that got to be those bold steps that they take. As Mayor Broom talked about, you know, we cite how she used her CARES Act dollars all the time because there's more money coming with the American Rescue Plan. Right. Folks are ready to get an influx of cash and resources to do work. And we're trying to get mayors to think ahead of the game, like get you an infrastructure built that's more about peace and safety than it's ever been before. Right. And think about how you can do that to stand it up now, then start using your dollars to invest in that over time. So right now we have so many opportunities to think forward and to think creatively and innovatively and to save lives.
Right.
Just to be 100% transparent about this, it really is about saving lives. And we've got to just be clear that, you know, I hear all the time we talk about data, and the data that we look at from law enforcement does not give us the outcomes that we should be looking for. We know we invest, but then we look at the outcomes. We still have crime. We still have all the things that happen that they're supposed to prevent. We've got to shift that model. And that's the plea, is just to say, look at the money that we spend, look at the outcomes from it. And if it's not giving us what we want, we should be willing to invest in something different. And we should be looking to invest in prevention and work, as you heard Mayor Broom and Mayor Nutter talked about, that really can get in there and make sure young people stay on track, make sure young people get what they need, make sure families get what they need. We have models and we have options, and now is the time. We can talk about the other money that the president has committed in, that $5 billion, which is a huge investment in this work that could change the course of this country if we get that right and put it in the right places. So again, this is a timely conversation. We could probably go on for 2 more hours, Mayor Johnson, but I'll turn it back over to you.
Mayor Johnson, I'm sorry, just one point of privilege. Anthony, I'm going to admonish you on this call. You cannot bury the lead. Anthony Smith and Cities United and a number of other organizations petitioned the president and his team and had direct meetings with Susan Rice, asked for $5.3 billion in the ARP, American Rescue Plan. The plan put forward $5 billion. That's the work of our folks, and in a coalition with a number of other organizations. I'm not saying Anthony did it by himself, but he was at the table. And when people do that kind of work, they need to be acknowledged. We need to talk about it and lift it up. And Cities United and the support that we get from Casey Family Programs and certainly National League of Cities. I mean, we're all in this work together, right? Nobody does all this stuff by themselves. But I just want to acknowledge on this call that folks understand the advocacy that goes into making stuff happen. They didn't just pull that number out of the sky. That wasn't something they were walking down the street and say, oh, let's put $5 billion into public safety. No, that was a request. It was an ask, and people we get invited to these tables because people know that we know what we're talking about.
Okay, well, thank you, and
Thank you for that,
again,
Mayor
let
Nutter.
me
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Just told Mayor Nutter, thank you for that.
Yeah, let me just say, those of you that's on the call, if you're a mayor, how important it is to become part of Cities United. I've been there for 6 years, and I can tell you, when you look at the work of Cities United and what Anthony does, really it's exciting work, and it's a lot of work. And Anthony, thank you for your role, and certainly the case of family programs. Now, at this time, we're going to just simply say that we've enjoyed the conference today. I was able to sit in most of it, but we've come to the end of it for today. So we thank the panel. We thank all of those that have joined us during the day to hear from panelists, different panelists. But at this time, don't leave if you're on. We're getting ready to turn it over to our president, Mayor McKinley Price, for closing comments, and he will lead you from here.
I want to thank everyone who's been on this panel and the other panels. It's been a great day. I want to thank everyone for attending our first day of the African American Mayors Association's 2021 virtual annual conference. Also, we want you to look forward to joining us on day 2, which will be Tuesday, May 11th, and you will be getting information about that and times and what's going on with that. So please be reminded also now that all of our active mayors are invited to join our annual meeting of mayors that begins at 1:45 to 2:15. The Business Council meeting will begin at 2:15 to 3 o'clock. The Zoom conference information has already been sent out for both of those meetings. So for questions regarding how to join, if you have any issues, please notify AAMA staff at aama@ourmayors.org. Thank you.